The moment I had been dreading finally arrived. My husband, who has tormented me endlessly, and his ever-judgmental mother have moved in. I can't even count the number of tears I've shed and the times I've been hurt. Despite it all, I've held on, trying my best to fulfill my role as a wife and homemaker. But my husband never seemed to care about my struggles. He even decided to move his mother into our home without consulting me. "Is your mom all moved in?" I asked. "Of course she is," he replied. "Well, here's the thing. She's settled in, and in fact, I just finished moving back to my parents' home." "Wait, what? Your parents' place?" His voice over the phone was tinged with panic. I could tell he hadn't seen this coming. "But don't think it ends here. I owe you for all the pain you've caused me. My name is Eleanor, a 44-year-old homemaker. I met Raymond at a party when I was 20, and we instantly clicked. Just 3 months later, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. A year later, as I turned 21, he asked, "Will you marry me?" A year after our marriage, I became pregnant, and our first son was born. I thought I would have the fairy tale life I had dreamed of during my school days, but life wasn't that simple. "Hey, is dinner ready yet? Did you make the bed?" That's what Raymond always says when he comes home from work. I sometimes wonder if he thinks of me just as a maid. "I'm sorry, I got a bit tied up. I'll get everything ready now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Seriously, don't you think about how tired I am after work? I deal with so much stress to provide for our family. And remember, I'm a manager. Raymond would always start ranting about his job whenever things didn't go his way, making snide remarks. He wasn't like this when we first got married. People often ask if I'm okay with how he behaves. Of course, I'm not. It's unbearable. But honestly, I do appreciate that he brings in the money. Thanks to Raymond's good salary, we've never had financial troubles. But imagine if I challenged him and he retorted, "You're defying me." "Fine, I'll stop contributing to the house then." I wouldn't know what to do. So even if he says a bit much sometimes, I try to tolerate it, though I wish I could say it was always easy. But with the way Raymond's been acting lately, even that tolerance is strained. Like the other day, he ranted, "Why aren't the clothes dry? You didn't even use the dryer, did you? I told you before I like my clothes feeling cozy. They need to be fluffy from the dryer." I had a lot on my plate with shopping and chores, so I didn't get to the dryer. That's not the point. I work hard every day, but what about you? Aren't you a homemaker? Shouldn't you have time for at least this? Raymond never does household chores. He believes that's the wife's job. Just because I'm a homemaker doesn't mean I always have free time. I wish he'd help out a little. It was the same story when our child was born. Always some excuse about being busy or tired from work. So I've done all the household and childcare duties by myself. But there's another source of stress. My mother-in-law. "Eleanor, did you clean this properly? And what are you planning for dinner tonight? Surely not some takeaway." Whenever my mother-in-law visits, she's always like this. She constantly looks for my mistakes and never hesitates to criticize. Both mother and son act similarly. Like they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And today she started again. "Eleanor, how many times have I told you to clean the house every day to make it comfortable for my son? Why don't you? Are you ignoring my advice on purpose? This is why I was against my son marrying someone like you. You can't even manage the house properly. Just looking at you infuriates me." Constant criticism from Raymond and my mother-in-law. I endure it all with a smile. But there's one thing I just can't overlook, my mother-in-law's gambling habit. Whenever she has the chance, she's playing poker, slot machines, roulette, or craps. She just loves to gamble and spends all her money in the blink of an eye. Worse still, she laughs about it, and Raymond just laughs along with her. Hold on a second. Whose money do you think you're using? The money my mother-in-law spends on gambling comes from our household savings. I've brought this up to Raymond multiple times, but he just brushes it off. "Hey, could you tell Mom? I mean, I could tell her, but if I do, I think she'd be really shocked. Plus, I'm so busy with work." I don't think I can discuss it calmly. He always comes up with these excuses and never asks. So I decide to convey Raymond's message to my mother-in-law for him. "Why can't a mother use the money her son earns?" "He told me I can use as much as I want," she retorted, thinking that Raymond would back me up. I say Raymond feels the same way. "Could you please stop using our household savings without asking?" "Right, honey." But Raymond interjects, "What are you talking about? The household savings are for all three of us, excluding only Mom." Is she wrong? Sorry, Mom. Don't listen to her. She's lying. You can use the money as you always have. This is how Raymond always changes his story depending on who he's talking to. Moreover, he started blaming me for my mother-in-law's gambling habits, saying they worsened after we got married 3 months ago. That's just not true. Even before our marriage, my mother-in-law was gambling frequently. Whenever I went shopping, I'd see her coming out of the local poker club. But when I bring this up to Raymond, he accuses me of lying and then ignores the issue. He'll never see his mother's true colors. These remarks keep coming, and I'm getting fed up. Oh, look at the time. I should get going. Wait, Mom, you didn't forget about our plan, right? How are the preparations? Yes, they're well underway. What plan? What are these two up to? I'm taken aback by Raymond's sudden question and try to figure out their scheme. With that, my mother-in-law, humming a tune, leaves in high spirits. At last, she's gone. I think to myself. I look over, and Raymond is grinning from ear to ear, waving until his mother's out of sight. A week later, I finally understood the meaning behind Raymond's words about preparations. Have a good day, I say, but there's only a slam as usual. Raymond leaves for work without responding to my farewell. While most couples would greet each other with smiles, that warmth is long gone between us. I gaze out the window and see a neighboring family looking so happy as they walk by. I remember the days when my son and I used to go for walks just like that. Lost in my thoughts in the morning, the doorbell rings. Yes, who is it? Oh, it's you, mother-in-law. Wait, where's Raymond? I wasn't expecting her to show up today, especially not this early in the morning. Oh, something came up at his work, so he had to go in unexpectedly. I see. Why on earth is she here? She's not expecting to have breakfast with me, is she? No way she would think of doing that, or would she? A flurry of thoughts about my mother-in-law raced through my mind. Then she says, "Why are you standing there looking so blank? Get things ready." Ready for what? I haven't eaten anything since this morning. I'm hungry, so make me breakfast. And make sure this doesn't happen again. What does she mean by "from now on"? The words "get ready" that Raymond mentioned earlier and mother-in-law's "from now on" phrase make me uneasy for some reason. I had a terrible feeling about this, feeling anxious about their comments. Mother-in-law pressures me to make breakfast. I apologize and start preparing the meal. Meanwhile, mother-in-law observes me, not even blinking. It feels more like monitoring than observing. Maybe it's hard to do under her piercing gaze. Silently and earnestly, I prepare the breakfast. Suddenly, mother-in-law says, "It's pitiful to think my son eats this poorly presented food every day. It looks terrible and probably tastes just as bad. I'd love to know how you manage to cook so poorly." She ridicules me, mockingly laughing and complaining. Why do I have to hear this first thing in the morning? What was supposed to be a pleasant morning feels as if it had turned into a downpour. Sorry for the wait, it took you long enough. How much time do you need for a meal like this? Maybe you should attend a cooking class, then you might be able to cook something decent. Even then, it'd be like getting a D instead of an F. Having a meal along with my mother-in-law for the first time, seeing her stern face while eating, I lost my appetite, and the meal I put so much effort into tasted bland. Suddenly, my mother-in-law sat down her fork, stating, "I don't even feel like eating this. Clear it away." I'm sorry, I just can't take this anymore. I wish she'd leave sooner. But little did I know, my wish would be shattered in no time. Ring, ring. Excuse me for a moment. Hey, Mom's there, right? Let me talk to her, Raymond requested, handing the phone to my mother-in-law. After Raymond's request, she exclaimed, "You told me we'd discuss that matter, making me come over so early. Now you say you're at work. What's going on?" "Sorry, something came up. I'll be back before noon. Just relax till then." Hurry up. Being with her is just stressful. She ended the call with Raymond and returned the phone to me with a slight throw. Trying to ask what Raymond had said, she just glared and told me he'd be back before noon. 3 hours later, Raymond returned home and immediately asked her, "Sorry, Mom, so are you ready?" "Yes, just need to pack my things." Before I could process it, Raymond dropped a bombshell. "From now on, Mom will live here too." What? It was a shock. I always thought it would be just the two of us living here, but now my mother-in-law will be moving in. The mere thought of my mother-in-law coming here terrifies me. Living a life constantly getting snide remarks from Raymond and my mother-in-law every day, I just can't bear the thought of it. "Mom, I'll help you move on my next day off." "That would be helpful, but don't bring her along. We don't need someone useless." "Don't worry, it'll just be me." The shocking twist left my mind blank. unable to process anything. That evening, Raymond and his mom went out for dinner alone. I pondered our future. How would I coexist with the two of them? Was I just supposed to endure everything, or was there another way? The same thoughts kept replaying, but no answers came. Lost in my despair, tears spilled when suddenly, ring ring, a phone call. Wiping away my tears, I answered, and the voice on the other end was, oh, a call from the most unexpected person. The familiar voice echoed in my ear when I picked up the phone. Mom, it's been a while. Eric, it has indeed. Have you been well? Yeah, I'm good. Granddad and Granny are also doing well. We're all getting along. It was my son, Eric, on the other end. After graduating from college, Eric took a job at a company near our family home. Because his work was close, he had chosen to live with his grandparents away from us. When will you come to visit? It's been years since you last did. The two of them really want to see you. I'm sorry, I've been so busy and just couldn't make it to the family home. Busy with what? Isn't it because of Dad and Grandmother? He hit the nail on the head. The reason I couldn't visit was indeed because of those two. Raymond didn't like the idea of me visiting my parents. As a homemaker, Raymond only sees me as a mere housekeeper. He has this ridiculous notion that I should always be taking care of the home, and his mother shared the same view. She too only saw me as a convenient housekeeper, always expecting me to tend to the house. So I felt trapped, unable to leave and just living within the confines of our home. It felt like I was a bird caged up. Eric knew this. He once visited this house and remembered the words Raymond and mother-in-law had hurled at me. Aren't you a homemaker? Then you need to do your household duties properly. A housekeeper who can't even do chores is useless anywhere. Be grateful you're even needed here by us. It was then that Eric first realized the treatment I was getting from the two of them. I thought as much. I'm sorry for making you worry. Listen, Mom, I have an idea. Then Eric suggested something unexpected. It was something I hadn't ever considered. Really? Are you serious? Of course. It's to help you, Mom. While it might seem obvious, Eric's words became the lifeline I needed for my hellish life. From the next day, while Raymond was at work, I started implementing what Eric had told me to do, being cautious not to let Raymond notice and always vigilant for the often unexpectedly appearing mother-in-law. There were a few close calls. Hey, have you been up to something lately? Why do you ask? Mom mentioned it. She said you've been acting differently. You're not cheating on me, are you? Last time, Raymond's ridiculous misunderstanding saved me, but I can't underestimate my mother-in-law. She's sharp. I need to be more careful and not let my guard down around her. Still, it's clear that Raymond doesn't really care about me. Well, that's fine. It actually makes things easier for me. In fact, it's a relief. I can't wait to see how they'll react to what comes next. Ring ring. Mom, how far along are you with the preparations? I've got everything ready and I've made a lot of progress. Now we just wait for the day. Speaking of which, do you know when Grandmother is moving in? She's moving in the day after tomorrow. I overheard them talking about it when they were in a good mood. I have to make sure they pay for everything they've done to me. The climax is approaching. The morning my mother-in-law is set to arrive. Don't slack off just because I'm not around. Also, help Mom with the luggage when she gets here and keep the house clean. Mom said she won't forgive even a speck of dust. I understand. After seeing Raymond off, I start the final preparations. Then the doorbell rings. Good morning, Mom. Eric, I'm sorry, but can you help me? Of course, let's get this done quickly before Grandmother arrives. With Eric's help, we finalize everything, and 30 minutes later, we're ready. All right, let's go. I hop into Eric's car, and we head to a certain place. Ring, ring. Hello, the moment has arrived. Raymond and mother-in-law have tormented me endlessly. I don't even know how many tears I've shed or how much pain I've endured. Yet I've persisted, trying my best as a homemaker. But Raymond never seemed to care about my struggles, and he decided to move in with his mother without discussing it with me. Is Mom all settled in? Of course she is. But guess what? Yes, she's all settled. And I've just finished moving back to my parents' home. What? Back to your parents? Raymond's panic was evident even over the phone. But that's not the end of it. He's got a lot coming his way. I delivered the final blow to Raymond today, the day we get divorced. The divorce papers already filled out with your name are on the table when you get home. All you need to do is sign and take them to the courthouse, just to make sure there's no delay. I've arranged for a lawyer to accompany you. The lawyer will also discuss the division of our assets. Raymond, taken aback, blurted out, Wait, what are you talking about? Divorce? Are you kidding me? No matter what you say, it won't change my mind. Oh, by the way, we don't have a single cent in our savings. What? That can't be true. I've been contributing every month. Yes, but your dear mother gambled all that money away. We have nothing left. What I suggest is that you and your mother figure things out. Good luck. Right after ending the call with Raymond, his mother showed up at the house, arms laden with bags, enthusiastically ringing the doorbell. I didn't answer. Infuriated, she yelled, "Hey, open up. How long are you going to keep me waiting out here? Open the damn door, you wretched woman." Screaming and swearing at the front door attracted the attention of a passerby. They suspected her of causing trouble and called the police. In just a few minutes, officers arrived and took her away. About 30 minutes later, a distraught Raymond, unable to focus on his work after hearing the news, rushed home, but I was nowhere to be seen. The only thing waiting for him was the divorce papers on the table. The sight left him completely speechless, and he just sat down, devastated. 2 hours later, the lawyer arrived and accompanied a despondent Raymond to the courthouse to submit the divorce papers. At last, our divorce was finalized. The next day, after being released from police custody, Raymond's mother came home only to find her son deeply affected by the shock of the divorce. Although Raymond had planned to live with her, the trauma of the divorce made him take a leave from work, and a month later, he resigned. With no income, he had to sell the new house they had just built. They managed to get by with the money from the sale, but his gambling-addicted mother depleted it all. Rumor has it they now live like homeless people in a nearby park. After the divorce, I began to live peacefully at my parents' house. The money from the sale of the house came to me as well. With that money, I commented, "This place is lovely." Yeah, it's a popular resort hotel these days. I was on vacation with my family, finally free from the nightmare. I could live my life on my own terms. That joy is unparalleled.
My name's Anna. I work as an economist for a big firm in the city. Numbers have always been my thing, but personal equations? Those I figured out the hard way. Life was on a predictable track until Mom got sick. It was just her and me after Dad passed away when I was a teenager. She was more than just a mom, she was my rock. When she got diagnosed with a condition that needed full-time care, I did the only thing that made sense. I sold her cozy house and moved her into a top-notch nursing home. The kind of place with gardens, 24-hour care, and even a piano in the lounge where she used to play her favorite tunes. It cost a fortune, but seeing her smile, playing those keys like she was young again, made every penny worth it. I remember one evening, after a long day of crunching numbers and balancing budgets, my boss, Lucy, dragged me to this party. Lucy's the head honcho at our firm, and despite her tough exterior, she's been my pillar through thick and thin. "Come on, Anna, you need to let your hair down every once in a while," she had said, her arm slung over my shoulder as we walked into the loud, crowded room. I was fumbling with my purse when I bumped into him, Ethan. He was all charm, from his crooked smile to his sparkly eyes. "Sorry, didn't see you there," he chuckled, handing me back my purse, which had landed at his feet. "It's all right, happens to the best of us," I replied, trying not to get lost in his deep blue eyes. As the evening rolled on, it turned out Ethan was the friend of a friend, and we got talking about everything from work to our favorite old movies. Turns out we both had a soft spot for old school jazz and spaghetti westerns. Lucy and I both took a liking to him, but it was clear Ethan had eyes only for me. Lucy noticed, but she was cool about it. After he asked me out, she pulled me aside, her drink in hand. "He's cute, but if he messes with you, I'll kick his ass," she half-joked in her usual no-nonsense manner. Ethan and I started dating soon after. It was all dinners, long walks, and nights spent talking about everything under the stars. He was different, kind, attentive, and he made me laugh. God, did I laugh during those first few months. Lucy stayed my rock, supporting me through my mom's worsening health, and my whirlwind romance with Ethan. When Ethan proposed, it was Lucy who helped me pick the dress, set up the venue, and even calmed my nerves right before I walked down the aisle. Married life kicked off like a dream. We'd wake up late on weekends, brew strong coffee, and talk about our future. And like any newlywed couple, we had our hearts set on finding the perfect nest, our own little corner in this big, bustling city. We spent countless Sundays driving around, peering at for sale signs, and dragging ourselves through endless open houses. The thrill of the hunt was real, but so was the sticker shock. I still remember Ethan's face the first time we looked at a house within our budget. $300,000 for this? Are they out of their minds? He blurted out as we toured a particularly cramped two-bedroom that looked more like a rundown shack than a cozy love nest. Maybe we're rushing into this. We could save up a bit more, give it another year or two. His words made sense, and honestly, the pressure to find a house right away was eating at me too. Yeah, maybe you're right. No need to rush. We've got plenty of time, I agreed, squeezing his hand. So, we put the house hunt on pause. It seemed like the sensible thing to do, and life went on. But things shifted when my mom passed. It was sudden, a call in the middle of the night that left me scrambling to get to her side, only to arrive too late. Losing her was like losing my anchor, and in the weeks that followed, I walked around in a daze. Ethan was there, though, holding me at night while I cried, making sure I ate something, even if it was just toast. One evening, as I was sorting through some of Mom's papers, I found documents from the nursing home about the remaining funds. It was a hefty sum, parked quietly in a savings account, around $200,000. I hadn't thought about it much, with everything going on. Ethan was in the kitchen when I told him. His reaction was, off. Wow, that's a lot of money, babe. You know, that could buy us a house outright. No more mortgage worries, he said, a little too quickly, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I remember frowning, feeling a twinge in my gut. Yeah, maybe, I muttered, folding up the paper. But let's think about it, okay? It's all pretty fresh. Sure, he replied, but there was a note in his voice that I couldn't place. Something that made me watch him a little more closely as he turned back to chopping vegetables, his knife tapping rhythmically against the cutting board. After what felt like an eternity of house hunting and countless discussions, Ethan and I finally bought our dream home. We settled on a charming little place not too far from the city center, but still with enough backyard space for maybe a dog or two down the line. We did it, babe, I said to Ethan as we stood in our new living room, boxes stacked around us waiting to be unpacked. Yeah, we did, he smiled, wrapping his arms around me. This is all ours. The house quickly turned into a project of love. We painted, decorated, and turned it into a home. Our weekends were filled with trips to furniture stores and discussions over coffee about which curtains matched the living room decor better. It was exhausting, but thrilling. A couple of months into our new homeowner bliss, Ethan suggested we visit his mom for dinner. It's been a while, and she keeps asking about the house, he said one morning, looking up from his phone. I had only met his mom a few times. She lived on the outskirts of a small village, surrounded by forests and fields. Her house, much like her lifestyle, was quaint but cluttered with jars of herbs and tinctures. She was a firm believer in natural remedies and often boasted about curing a cold with nothing but a special tea or a concoction of her own making. When we arrived, the aroma of something herbal wafted through the air. Ethan's mom, Martha, greeted us warmly but looked a bit pale. Oh, I'd just been feeling under the weather, she explained as she led us into the kitchen where dinner was laid out. Have you seen a doctor? I asked, concerned, as we settled around the table. Martha scoffed, shaking her head vigorously. No, I don't trust those doctors. I've got my own remedies. She gestured towards the countless jars lining the shelves. During dinner, Martha's cough seemed to worsen, and she casually mentioned, You know, Anna, maybe you could stay for a few days, help me out around here with some things? I was caught off guard. Oh, Martha, I wish I could, but work is slammed right now. We just took on a big project, and I can't really take any time off, I explained, trying to keep my tone gentle. Maybe you should do what my mom did? Martha's eyes narrowed a bit. I remember you put your mother in a nursing home, she said abruptly. Maybe that's what you think I need too. I felt a stab of pain at the mention of my mom. It was the best option for her, Martha. She needed professional care that I couldn't provide at home. Martha shook her head, dismissing my explanation. I would never let strangers take care of me. I'll stick to my herbs and tinctures, she declared, gesturing defiantly at her collection. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Ethan didn't say much, and I felt the tension thickening. As we drove home, I tried to break the ice. Ethan, I didn't mean to upset your mom. It's just... He cut me off, his voice cold. Maybe you could have been a bit more understanding, Anna. She's old school, you know how she is. When Ethan and I walked through the door of our home that night, the silence was deafening. The drive had been icy cold, the kind of silence that weighs down every word before it can be spoken. We both knew something had shifted, and not for the better. As I hung up my coat, Ethan finally broke the silence. Anna, do you even love me? His voice was a mix of frustration and disbelief. I turned, startled by his question. What? Of course, I do. Why would you even ask that? He paced a bit before stopping in front of me, his eyes searching mine. Because you wouldn't stay to help my mom. If you loved me, you'd care about my family too. I was taken aback. Ethan, I do care. I've always supported your relationship with your mom. But I can't just drop everything, Anne. And what? Lie there? He snapped. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're not willing to make sacrifices. His words hung in the air, and I could feel the tension spike. Then, he added something that rocked me to my core. Maybe I was wrong about us. If you can't support me with this, maybe we shouldn't be together. I was speechless, my mind racing. This was not the man I married. The man I loved was understanding, compassionate. Not the stranger making ultimatums. With nowhere else to turn, I called Lucy. Her phone rang a couple of times before she picked up. Hey, Anna, everything okay? I poured out everything, from the dinner with Martha to Ethan's harsh words and the looming threat of divorce. Lucy listened quietly, only interjecting to clarify a point or two. After I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then, that's rough, Anna, but you know what? You did what you could. You can't just upend your life because Ethan or his mom expects you to. And threatening divorce? That's manipulative, Anna. You see that, right? Talk to him when things have cooled off. The next few weeks were tough. Ethan became more withdrawn, barely helping around the house, always buried in his phone or out for long walks alone. Whenever his mom called, he'd put her on speakerphone, ensuring I heard every complaint about her health and how she was sure she'd die without our help. Each call ended with a significant look in my direction, a silent accusation. Anna, please, think about it. I'm not getting any better. Martha would plead, her voice loud and clear from the speaker. Ethan would glance over at me, his eyes hard. You hear that, Anna? She needs us. But I couldn't bring myself to give in, not like this, not with guilt as the driving force. I knew I had to stand my ground, but with each passing day, the gap between Ethan and me widened, filled with unsaid words and unresolved tensions. 2 weeks later, Lucy and I were at our favorite cafe, a little spot we'd often escape to during work breaks. The noise of the city faded as we sipped our coffee and delved into our worlds, hers, the office, mine, increasingly tangled and dark. So, what's up? Lucy asked, her eyebrows knitting together as she noticed my distracted look. I stirred my coffee, the sugar dissolving like the last bits of my patience. It's Ethan, and his mom. Things are getting weird, Lucy. More than just the usual family drama. Lucy leaned in, her interest piqued. Weird how? What's he doing? He's pushing really hard for me to move in with his mom, like, obsessively. And he's been weirdly secretive. Something's off, I said, feeling the weight of my words. Lucy's face hardened. You think he's up to something? Anna, you might want to check this out properly. Maybe hire a private detective? See what he's really up to. 2 days later, I met with a detective, a gruff man with sharp eyes, named Mike. I explained everything, how Ethan's behavior had shifted, his sudden insistence on his mother's house. Mike listened, jotting down notes. "We'll see what we can dig up. It does sound like he's hiding something. Give me a couple of weeks." Those weeks were long. Each day, Ethan's coldness turned our home into a silent battleground. His calls with his mom were now daily serenades of guilt and manipulation, always on speaker. Then, the call I was waiting for came. "Anna, we need to talk." Mike's voice was grave, even over the phone. We met at the same cafe where I had confided in Lucy. Mike laid his findings out like a deck of cards, each one worse than the last. "Your husband's in deep trouble at work. He's on the verge of being fired because of some shady deals. And there's more, he's racked up a heap of debt, all under your radar." Mike started, his eyes never leaving mine. My heart sank. "Debts? How much are we talking about?" "Enough that he's desperate. He's taken out loans against his future earnings, maxed out credit cards, the works. But here's the kicker." Mike paused, sliding a recording device across the table. I stared at it, my hands trembling as I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the cafe, mingled with his mother's croaky whispers. "Once Anna moves in here and I get her to transfer her assets, we can handle everything. Her money will cover it all." Ethan's voice was cold, calculated. I stopped the recording, nausea rolling in my stomach. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word for this. Mike's next words were a blur as he advised me to get legal protection. "See a lawyer, lock down your accounts. Fast." The next day, I met with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Janet who specialized in family law. "We'll start by securing your accounts. Then, we'll discuss your options regarding your marriage." As I left her office, a plan forming, I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. Relief that I was taking steps to protect myself, and devastation that the man I loved, the man I had married, was a stranger. It was a week of sleepless nights and distracted days at work. The phone rang, startling me from a report I'd been staring at for far too long. It was Lucy. Her voice was urgent. "Anna, can you come to my office? Now. We need to talk." A chill ran down my spine. "Sure, I'll be right there," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. Lucy's tone had been serious, more than usual. I made my way to her office, my stomach tightening with every step. As soon as I walked in, Lucy shut the door and gestured for me to sit. She looked grave, her usual playful demeanor gone. "Anna, there's something you need to hear," she began, her voice low. "Ethan has been calling me. A lot. He's been making advances. He told me he made a mistake, that he should have chosen me, not you." My heart pounded painfully. "What? Lucy, what are you talking about?" She held up her hand, stopping my barrage of questions. "I recorded one of our conversations. You need to hear this yourself." She pulled out her phone, found a file, and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, smooth and conniving. "Lucy, you know I've always liked you. If only I'd made the right choice back then. But it's not too late. We could fix that." My breath hitched as I listened, each word a dagger. But worse was yet to come. "I need a favor," Ethan continued on the recording. "Could you find a reason to let Anna go? Fire her. Once she's out of work, I can convince her to move in with my mom. Manage her finances, you know? Then there's nothing stopping us. Just think about it. Just us, together." I sat there, numb, as the recording ended. Lucy's face was a mask of fury and disgust. I played along, Anna. To see how far he'd go. He actually thought I was on his side, she explained, her voice thick with anger. Why would he want me to move in with his mom so badly? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Lucy shrugged, her lips pressed into a thin line. I don't know, Anna, but it's clear he's planning something sinister. You've got to be careful. Find out what he's really up to. I nodded, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and confusion. I will. I just need to think about how to handle this. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together, Lucy said, her hand reaching across the desk to squeeze mine. I left her office with a heavy heart. Ethan's betrayal was deeper and more twisted than I could have imagined. All this time, his plans, his deception, it was overwhelming. That evening, as I sat across from Ethan at dinner, watching him pretend like nothing was amiss, I felt like I was seeing him for the first time. After dinner, I retreated to our bedroom under the guise of needing an early night. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. My thoughts kept circling back to one thing: why was it so important for Ethan to get me to his mother's house? What was the ultimate gain? Driving to Martha's house felt different this time. As we pulled up, she greeted us at the door, leaning heavily on her walking stick. Her pale face broke into a strained smile. "Oh, Ethan, Anna, it's so good to see you both. I really could use some help around here. I barely manage to get around these days." Ethan shot me a look, his eyes pleading for me to say something supportive. I nodded slightly, swallowing my apprehension. "I'm sorry to hear that, Martha. It must be tough." As we settled into the uncomfortable familiarity of the living room, with its shelves of dusty books and jars of herbs, Martha's complaints grew more frequent. She lamented her inability to even venture into her beloved garden. "Maybe a short walk might help? If you're up for it, I could help you to the garden," I suggested, watching her closely. "Oh, that would be lovely, dear," Martha beamed. "I just need to grab a sweater from the car. It's a bit chilly today," I said, excusing myself. Once outside, I quickly pulled out my phone, activated the dictaphone app, and slipped it into my pocket. My hands shook as I headed back, knowing that whatever was about to unfold would change everything. I helped Martha to her feet, and we slowly made our way to the garden. "I'll be right back, just going to the bathroom," I murmured to Ethan, detouring back inside. Instead of heading to the bathroom, I tucked myself away in a small alcove near the living room, out of sight but within earshot. Their voices were low but clear, and what I heard froze my blood. "Everything's almost ready, Mom. Just a bit longer, and I'll bring Anna here for a visit," Ethan said, his tone disturbingly casual. Martha's response was a chilling giggle. "I prepared everything, dear. Those special herbs I told you about? They'll do the trick. No one will suspect a thing once she starts drinking them." Ethan laughed, a sound that twisted my stomach. "And then it's just us. We can finally use her money to clear my debts and more." Martha's voice was greedy as she replied, "Yes, yes, and you'll inherit everything after she's gone. Just make sure she stays here long enough." I waited, my heart pounding, until their voices faded, discussing mundane plans about the garden. Stepping quietly from my hiding spot, I rejoined them outside as if nothing had happened. "Shall we go back inside? It looks like it might rain," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The ride home was a silent nightmare. As soon as we reached home, I mumbled an excuse about feeling unwell and needing to rest. Alone in the safety of our bedroom, I replayed the recording, each word confirming the horrifying truth. The next evening, I walked through the door of our house, my emotions a whirlwind of staged anger and hidden fear. Ethan was in the living room, idly flipping through a magazine. Slamming my bag onto the sofa, I let out a controlled breath to simulate distress. "Can you believe it, Ethan? Lucy just fired me. No warning, nothing, just out of the blue." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes widening, not with concern, but an unmistakable glint of satisfaction. "Fired? Well, that's unexpected. But, Anna, maybe it's for the best. Now there's nothing keeping you here. You can move in with my mom. You know she needs you." The raw shock I feigned masked my boiling anger. "Move in with your mom? Are you serious? After everything, that's what you suggest?" I shot back, my voice rising in controlled indignation. Ethan stood, his expression hardening as he approached me. "Yes, I am serious. If you cared at all, you'd do this." And if you won't, maybe we shouldn't be together. Maybe a divorce will make you change your mind. His words were the cue I needed. With a grim smile, I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag, their crisp edges a symbol of my newfound resolve. Funny you should mention that, I said, handing them to him. I've been thinking the same thing. Ethan's face went white, but the next second, he came towards me with a menacing grimace on his face. Just then, the door swung open. Lucy and Janet, my lawyer, stepped in, their timing perfect. Ethan recoiled as if struck, the realization dawning on him that his game was up. Janet stepped forward, her presence commanding. Ethan, you can make this easy. Sign the papers, give up claims on the house and your joint savings, walk away, and we won't press charges for what you and your mother planned. We have recordings as evidence. Ethan looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting from my face to Lucy's and then back to the lawyer. Recordings, he stammered, his voice barely a croak. What recordings? The recordings of your conversations with your mother, Martha Miller, the lawyer clarified, her voice devoid of emotion. Conversations that clearly outline your plan to poison Mrs. Anna Miller and inherit her assets. A strangled gasp escaped Ethan's lips. His defiance crumbled, the bluster draining from him as he looked between the three of us. With a shaky hand, he signed the papers, his future, our shared past, disintegrating with each stroke of the pen. Good choice, Janet said, her voice cool as she collected the documents. You'll find it's much easier this way. Lucy approached me, her hand on my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I think I will be, I replied, watching as Ethan's figure shrank, his plans and plots reduced to nothing more than memories and warnings. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's world unraveled further. Fired from his job due to the shady dealings, burdened by debts, he was forced to sell his mother's house just to stay afloat. They ended up in a rented apartment, a stark contrast to the life he had plotted to steal from me. As for me, I remained in the house that was once ours, now solely mine. Lucy and I, our friendship solidified by the ordeal, often sat in my garden, talking about everything and nothing. Life had thrown me into the depths, but I had emerged, not just surviving, but thriving. I'm Sarah, just a regular woman who's seen her share of life's ups and downs. For 24 long years, I've been the backbone of a family that didn't always see or appreciate my worth. My husband, Richard, has a bit of fame as a TV presenter on a channel that's barely hanging on to its viewers. Then there's my daughter, Emily, who at 18 thinks she's got the world figured out, and my son, Mark, who moved out to start his own life at 23. After spending the best years of my life making sure everyone else was taken care of, I decided it was high time to dust off my old dreams. I used to be pretty good with dogs, even trained as a handler once. So, I got a job at the pet shelter down the road. You'd think I'd announced I was running off to join the circus, the way Richard reacted. Working at a shelter, Sarah? Really? Have you lost your mind? Richard scoffed as he flipped through the channels, not even looking at me. It's just part-time, and I like it. It makes me happy, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady against his disdain. Happy? We're not teenagers, Sarah. Grow up. You spending time with those strays is embarrassing. What will people say? His words were sharp, cutting deeper than he probably knew. I wanted to argue, to scream that I had every right to do something for myself, but I bit my tongue. Fighting with Richard was like talking to a brick wall, only less rewarding. Emily was no better. She walked in, her phone glued to her hand as always, and rolled her eyes when she saw us. Mom, are you still on about that shelter thing? Why can't you do something cool, like start a fashion blog or something? Because dogs are what I love, Em. I thought you'd be happy for me, I said, feeling the sting of her words. It hurt that my own daughter found my passion so unworthy. Dogs? Really, Mom? That's just sad. You need to get with the times. She scoffed, her words dripping with teenage condescension as she flopped down on the couch. I sighed, looking over at Richard for some sort of support, but he was too busy grooming his image in front of the mirror, fussing over a spot on his tie. "Richard, do you hear how she talks to me?" He barely glanced my way, adjusting his tie. "Well, if you acted more like someone her age could respect, maybe she wouldn't talk to you like that." That stung. It really did. The dismissal from both of them was a cold reminder of what my life had become. Ignored and underestimated. But no more. This job at the shelter, it was mine. It was something I loved, something that brought me back to life after years of being whatever they needed. I went to bed that night with a plan. I wasn't going to let them tear me down anymore. I was good with animals, and the shelter needed me. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to find myself again after all these years of being lost in the shadows of my family. Richard always had a thing about appearances, his clothes pristine, his hair just so, every aspect of his public persona polished to a sheen. I'd spent the better part of our marriage ensuring his suits were lint-free, the creases sharp enough to cut glass. "Image is everything in my line of work, Sarah. You know that," he'd remind me constantly, as if I could forget. Lately, though, something in me had started to slip. I was forgetting things, simple things, like the exact way he liked his coffee or the time of his next broadcast. "You're not getting any younger," he'd joke, but the barb was always there, hidden under his chuckle. This particular evening, tension hung over dinner like a storm cloud. Emily, ever the echo of her father, was busy texting under the table, barely touching her food. I served Richard his coffee, my hands shaky from the day's stress. "Sarah, where's the cardamom? Didn't I ask for it? Can't you do one thing right?" His voice was sharp, each word a needle prick to my already deflating spirit. I thought I added it. Let me fix that," I muttered, fumbling through the spice cabinet while he tapped his foot impatiently. Watching me, Richard let out a heavy sigh. "It's like you're not even here anymore. You're just so scattered." The bag of cardamom slipped from my fingers, scattering seeds across the tile. "Oh, damn it!" I exclaimed, more to myself than to him. Richard rolled his eyes, and Emily let out a snort of laughter from the table. "Mom's losing it, Dad. Seriously, she can't even handle spices," she jeered, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm trying," I said, my voice low, the embarrassment burning my cheeks. Richard's frown deepened. "Trying? No, you're failing, Sarah. This isn't just about cardamom or coffee. You're not yourself. You need to see someone, get checked out. I can't have you falling apart on me." His words stung, the implication clear, I was a problem that needed fixing. Emily's laughter echoed in my ears, a cruel soundtrack to my crumbling self-esteem. I started cleaning up, the seeds a tiny mess among bigger issues. "Maybe I should see a doctor," I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to Richard or trying to convince myself. "Maybe you should," he agreed quickly, a little too quickly, as if the idea pleased him. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. Plates clinked, forks scraped, and my mind whirled with fears of dementia and doctors. After dinner, I washed dishes, the warm water running over my hands while my thoughts spiraled dark and deep. Richard and Emily retreated to his office upstairs, their voices a murmur through the ceiling. Alone with the suds and my spiraling thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling of being fundamentally inadequate. Was I really losing my mind? The thought terrified me. Saturday had a way of sneaking up on you, all lazy sunshine and the promise of a little peace. I was cleaning up the kitchen, wiping down counters and humming some tuneless song when it hit me. I'd forgotten Richard's coffee cup in his office upstairs. My hands were still a bit damp as I reached the top of the stairs, my mind on autopilot, planning what to do next after retrieving the dishes. But as I neared his office door, voices trickled out, seeping under the crack like unwelcome water. I paused, recognizing Richard's voice, then Emily's lighter, laughing tone followed. Curiosity pricked me, urging me closer. "Do you think your mother suspects anything at all?" Richard's voice, usually so commanding on screen, sounded almost giddy. Emily laughed, that high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Mom? She's too busy scrubbing floors and feeding those mangy dogs. She doesn't see past the end of her nose." Richard's voice dropped to a whisper, but his words were clear as crystal. "Once I bring Miranda here, things will change. We'll be better off. You like Miranda, don't you?" "Oh, Dad, I love her. She's amazing, smart, beautiful, everything Mom's not. She actually has a career, makes money. It'll be so cool to have her around." "Exactly, my thoughts too. And once your mother is out of the way, we can live as we want. Miranda is eager to move in, start fresh with us." My heart pounded, the room spun, a carousel of betrayal and shock. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak, my breath shallow. This wasn't a conversation, it was a conspiracy. My family wasn't just slipping away from me, they were sprinting. I stumbled back downstairs, my mind racing, terror and disbelief jockeying for position. By the time I reached the living room, my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the sofa, my breaths coming in jagged pulls. I must have looked a sight because when Emily came down later, her brow furrowed slightly, a crack in her usual indifferent armor. "Mom, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice, tinged with faux concern, made my stomach churn. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time, a plan. But what? "Just tired, honey. Very tired," I managed, my voice a hollow echo of normalcy. "Okay, well, if you need something, I guess let me know." She shrugged, her detachment reassembling itself like armor as she turned away, leaving me adrift in the sea of my turmoil. Sunlight was already sneaking through the curtains when I woke up, my mind a tangled mess of dreams and nightmares, all mixing together until I couldn't tell one from the other. For a fleeting moment, I hoped that what I'd overheard last night was just another bad dream. I shuffled into the kitchen, still in my nightgown, my thoughts as disheveled as my hair. Richard and Emily were already there, their morning routine in full swing as if our world hadn't just shifted on its axis. "Morning," I mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. The strong aroma did nothing to clear the fog in my brain. "Good morning, Mom," Emily said, a little too cheerfully. Richard just nodded, his eyes glued to his phone. But then, their eyes met, and they shared a quick, secretive smile, a small, poisonous thing that didn't reach their eyes. That smile, it was like a slap, waking me up better than the strongest coffee ever could. They didn't know I'd seen it, but it was all the confirmation I needed that last night wasn't a figment of my imagination. "I'm heading to the shelter today. Lots to do," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely acknowledged it, just nods and mumbles, their minds obviously elsewhere. As soon as breakfast was over, I made my way to the little cafe down the street where I'd agreed to meet Mark. The whole walk there, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the morning bustle around me. Mark was already there when I arrived, his face lighting up in a smile when he saw me. "Mom, are you okay? You look, I don't know, upset?" I forced a smile, but as I sat down, the facade crumbled. "Mark, I need to tell you something important," I started, my voice a shaky whisper. I told him everything, about the overheard conversation, the plans, the chilling disregard they had for me. Mark listened, his face hardening with every word. "Mom, are you sure you heard right? Maybe it was out of context?" I nodded, tears spilling over, despite my best efforts to keep them in check. "No, it was clear. They want me gone, Mark. What am I going to do?" He reached across the table, taking my hands in his. Okay, let's not panic. We'll sort this out. I'll call Dave's dad, he's a private detective. He can help us get to the bottom of this." True to his word, Mark pulled out his phone and dialed right there, explaining the situation in low, urgent tones. Within minutes, he'd arranged for us to meet the detective. We went to the detective's office, a cramped little space filled with files and the faint smell of old coffee. The detective, a grizzled man with sharp eyes, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This is serious, Mrs. Thompson. If what you're saying is true, we need to act quickly, but discreetly. I'll need some time to investigate, look into your husband's finances, his movements, check for any evidence of this woman he's involved with. Back home, I slipped back into my role, the doting wife and mother, my heart heavy, my smile forced. Richard and Emily were none the wiser, caught up in their own secretive world. Every look, every whisper between them felt like a knife twisting deeper, but I bore it silently, waiting for the day I could confront them with the truth, armed with more than just my broken heart. When the call came from the detective, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hold the phone steady. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk. It's urgent," he said, his voice a low rumble of seriousness that sent shivers down my spine. I agreed to meet him immediately, and Mark, sensing the gravity, decided to come along. We met at a nondescript coffee shop, a place where conversations could disappear into the hum of daily grind. The detective looked graver than the last time we'd seen him, his eyes sharp and assessing as we sat down. "Mrs. Thompson, we've uncovered quite a bit," he began, flipping open a small notebook brimming with notes. "Your husband's psychologist, if we can even call her that without spitting, is more than just a therapist. She's his lover, and they've been seeing each other for over a year." The words stung, each one a lash against the already raw edges of my betrayal. Mark's hand found mine under the table, a lifeline in the storm. "They're planning to get married," the detective continued. "And they don't plan on leaving you with much." How could he do this?" I whispered, my voice barely a thread of sound. "That's not even the worst part," the detective said grimly. "They've been drugging you. The lady friend suggested it, to make you appear unstable. They're using a powerful sedative, adding it to your tea. This would explain any memory lapses or confusion you've experienced recently." A cold dread settled over me, a fog so dense it threatened to choke. My own home, my sanctuary had become a trap. "The plan is to have you declared mentally unfit. They've even roped in some crooked doctors who would testify to your instability for a price," he added, his voice a blend of anger and pity. I felt sick, the coffee shop spinning around me. "My daughter, does she know about this?" "Yes, she's involved." His confirmation was a bullet, straight through whatever shred of hope I had left that Emily was still my little girl. We left the meeting with a plan simmering between us. At home, Richard greeted me with a cup of my favorite tea, his smile too sweet, too venomous. I took the cup with a trembling hand, my heart pounding against my chest like it wanted out. "Here, love, I made it just how you like it," Richard said, watching me with eyes I no longer recognized. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice a mask of normalcy over the scream inside. I waited for him to turn back to his newspaper, then I quietly poured the tea into the plant next to my chair, watching the liquid disappear into the soil. For the next several weeks, I played the part of the forgetful wife perfectly. I'd misplace keys, forget names, stumble over words. Richard and Emily watched with poorly veiled triumph, not knowing that with each act, I was silently sealing their fate. Richard's birthday was looming like a storm on the horizon. He had taken it upon himself to organize a lavish party, claiming it was because he couldn't trust me, the woman who couldn't remember the simplest things. "You're staying at home, Sarah," he had said with a patronizing tone that morning. "It's for the best, you know, with your condition." I nodded, a meek, submissive smile plastered on my face, while rage and resolve warred within me. "Of course, Richard. I wouldn't want to ruin your big day." As soon as the door shut behind Richard and Emily, my act dropped. I was on the phone with Mark within seconds. "It's time," I said, my voice a mix of nerves and determination. "I'm on my way, Mom. We'll show them," he replied, his tone as steely as mine felt. Dressed inconspicuously, we drove to the venue. The restaurant was buzzing with Richard's colleagues, friends, and even his well-groomed mistress, all gathered to celebrate. We slipped in unnoticed, taking cover behind a large pillar, just as Richard grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this special day," he began, his voice dripping with faux humility. "Sadly, Sarah couldn't make it tonight. She's not been herself lately," he sighed, the crowd murmuring their sympathy. But, on a brighter note, his smile widened. I've just been offered my own evening show on a major channel. It's a dream come true." The room erupted in applause, people clinking glasses as Richard basked in the adulation. That was our cue. I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. We moved toward the stage, my heart thumping in my chest like a drum. Just as the applause died down, we stepped into the light. Richard's face went from joyous to ashen in seconds, his eyes wide with shock. Mark didn't hesitate, he strode up and smoothly took the microphone from Richard's hand. "If I could have your attention, please," he announced. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. "I have a special gift for my father and his beloved," Mark continued, his voice calm but loud. A projector whirred to life behind us, and images flooded the screen, photos of Richard and his mistress, their intimacy undeniable. Whispers crescendoed into gasps as video clips rolled, their cozy dinners, their sneaky exits from her apartment. Then the audio played, clear and damning, discussions of drugging me, of bribing doctors, all to steal my place in this house, in this family. Richard and his mistress exchanged desperate looks, trapped by their own deceit. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and anger vibrating through the air. I took the microphone from Mark, my hand steady, despite the turmoil around us. "I am not as ill as my husband hoped," I declared, my voice strong and clear. "This, what you see on this screen, I arranged for this gift, especially for his mistress." The scandal erupted right then and there, the mistress fleeing the room with Richard stumbling after her. As the room buzzed with the aftershock, one of Richard's relatives approached me. "I recorded everything, Sarah. It's all on video. I'll send it to you," he whispered, handing me his business card. After the explosive reveal at Richard's birthday bash, the fallout was immediate and merciless. The video of his betrayal and scheming went viral overnight, replayed on every gossip show and news outlet you could think of. Richard, who had always craved the spotlight, finally got his wish, though not in the way he had hoped. The backlash was swift. His once promising career on television crumbled, the network dropped him like a hot potato, citing moral clauses and public outrage. Meanwhile, I took steps to untangle myself from the man I once vowed to stand by. My lawyer was a godsend, a no-nonsense woman who cut through the legal jargon and helped me file for divorce. The evidence was overwhelming, and the court had no qualms in granting me not only the divorce, but also a hefty financial compensation from Richard and his mistress. The fact that they had drugged me made it a criminal matter, too, but my focus was on severing ties, not extending court battles. "Sarah, you've secured lifelong alimony, and the house is yours. They can't touch you financially anymore," my lawyer announced with a satisfied smirk when it was all over. The mistress, Miranda, a once respected psychologist, saw her career disintegrate. Her license was revoked following an investigation into her unethical behavior. The doctors she colluded with faced similar fates, their medical licenses stripped and reputations tarnished. With no career and mounting legal fees, Miranda sold her office and took out loans to fulfill the court's compensation orders. Last I heard, she and Richard were living together in a cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Karma, as they say, can be quite the equalizer. During all this upheaval, my daughter Emily came to me, tears in her eyes, remorse finally breaking through her previously cold demeanor. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong. Can I stay with you?" Her words stung, reopening wounds that had barely started to heal. "Emily, I love you. You're my daughter, and that will never change. But you chose to side with your father, knowing what he planned for me. I think it's time you learn what real consequences feel like." She moved out the next day, her belongings stuffed into too many bags, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her choices. Last I heard, she was living with Richard and Miranda, the atmosphere there as strained as one would expect. Richard tried to reach out once, a call I let go to voicemail. His message was a mix of self-pity and blame, a cocktail I no longer had the taste for. "Sarah, I hope we can talk. There are things I need to explain," the voice said, trailing off into a sigh. I deleted the message, the final note of his voice swept away with a single tap. After everything that went down, here I am, back in the world of dogs, my first love and passion. I'm not just working at the shelter anymore, I've started offering private dog training courses right here at home. My backyard has transformed into a haven for all things canine, agility equipment, training mats, and more toys than you can shake a stick at. Mom, this place looks amazing, Mark said on one of his frequent visits. He walked around with a proud smile as he watched me put a rowdy pup through its paces. Thanks, honey. It feels right, you know? Like I've found my way back to where I was always meant to be, I replied, tossing a ball for an overly enthusiastic golden retriever. The scandal, though a nightmare at the time, strangely did wonders for my business. Clients started pouring in, some admittedly curious about the scandal, but they stayed for the results. I'll be honest, Sarah, I first heard about you from the news. One of my clients, a friendly woman with a stubborn dachshund, confessed during a session. But I saw how you handled Bella here, and I knew the news wasn't the real story. You're the real deal. I laughed, giving Bella an affectionate pat as she finally nailed the sit-stay command we'd been working on. I appreciate that. It's good to know my 15 minutes of fame brought me some genuinely nice clients. It's not all about dogs, though. Mark comes around a lot, helping me with the heavier tasks around the yard, his company a constant reminder of how much good there still is in my life. Mom, you ever think about how things turned out? You know, after everything? Mark asked one afternoon as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. All the time, I admitted, sipping my tea. It was tough, really tough. But look at this, I'm happy, Mark. Really happy. I wouldn't change a thing. He nodded, a knowing grin spreading across his face. I'm proud of you, Mom. You turned a mess into a message. And he's right. I did. I get to spend my days doing what I love, surrounded by wagging tails and wet noses. The peace and contentment that fills my days now is something I used to dream about during those dark times. Hey, Mom, think you'll ever forgive him? Dad, I mean? Mark asked one evening, the question hanging in the air like smoke. I thought about it, really thought about it. I've moved on, but forgive? Not. And that's okay. I've learned that some things you just have to let be. That's the truth of it. I've found strength I never knew I had, and a resilience that's seen me through the worst of storms. The days are long, filled with barks and laughs, and as I close the gate each evening, I look up at the stars, grateful for the quiet ending to another day filled with life. Let me tell you a bit about us. My name's Eleanor, and I've been married to Thomas for many years. We've got 2 kids, Ava, our oldest, and James, the youngest. Living with us, you'd see right away how different the air is between them. I was a stay-at-home mom, see, 'cause Thomas did all right by us, made enough so I could focus on the kids. Mom, where's my blue notebook? I swear I left it right here. Ava would shout down from her room, always losing things, but managing to keep her life more organized than a planner. Check under your bed. I'd yell back, knowing her room like the back of my hand. Ava, she was sharp as a tack, went off to college on a scholarship and never looked back. Didn't cost us a dime for her schooling. Now James, that boy was another story. Thomas, God bless him, loved that boy a bit too much. Favored him, you know? Always in his corner, even when he messed up, which was more often than not. James, you need to take life a bit more seriously, I remember telling him one evening at dinner. He just rolled his eyes, fork halfway to his mouth. Come on, Eleanor, the boy will find his way. He's young. Let him have some fun. Thomas chimed in, always the peacemaker. Mom, Dad's right. I'm just trying to figure things out, James would say, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the irritation there, clear as day. He was good at making you feel like you were the one seeing things wrong. Ava was different. When she moved out, got her job, and started her life, she never asked for a penny. Proud of her, I was. I made sure to budget, Mom. I don't want to be a bother. She'd tell me over the phone, and my heart would swell with pride. Meanwhile, James seemed to think our pockets were as deep as the ocean. "Hey, can I get some cash?" Going out with the guys, he'd drop casually, like he was talking about the weather. "It's not a bank, James." "What happened to the job hunt?" I'd press, trying not to let the frustration bleed through. "Jobs suck, Mom. I'm still looking for the right fit," he'd grumble, always with an excuse. Thomas and I would go back and forth about it. "He's just lost, Eleanor. He'll settle down," he'd assure me, but the worry lines etched deeper with each passing day. I'd sit there, coffee in hand, morning light streaming through the window, wondering where we went wrong. Was it too much love? Not enough tough love? James had set his sights on a prestigious college right out of high school, a place in a neighboring city known for its academic rigor. The fact that the college was expensive seemed to bother him less than it should. Thomas and I were roped into paying not just for his tuition, but also for a rented apartment where he could stay while attending classes. It was a big financial strain, but Thomas believed it was all worth it for our son's future. "My studies are going great," James would assure us over the phone, his voice always upbeat. "You guys don't need to worry about a thing," he'd add, and Thomas would nod, satisfied, passing on the latest cheerful update. But as months turned into a year and then another, the details were sparse. We got snippets of his life, a mention of a test here, a group project there, but never anything concrete. No grades, no reports, nothing that actually showed how he was doing. It started off like any other Tuesday. I was busy with the laundry, thinking about what to make for dinner, when something nagged at me, a mother's intuition, you might call it. James had been at the university for 2 years now, but we hardly got any updates. No report cards, no calls from professors, nothing. Just monthly calls asking for money. "Thomas, don't you think it's odd? We never see any grades from James," I mentioned one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. Thomas, always the optimist, just shrugged it off. "He's probably just busy, Ellie. You know how college can be." The next morning, I drove down to the university. It was a nice place, all ivy-covered buildings, and young folks looking like they had their whole lives sorted out. I headed straight for the dean's office, to get the lowdown on how James was doing. "Hi, I'm Eleanor, James Carter's mother. I'd like to hear about how he's doing," I said to the lady at the front desk. She typed something into her computer, frowned, and then typed some more. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but it appears there's been a mistake. According to our records, James hasn't been enrolled here for the past 7 months." I felt like the floor dropped away from beneath me. "What do you mean? Can you check again, please?" She showed me the screen, and there it was in plain black and white. James had dropped out. Just like that. My heart was pounding as I thanked her and walked out, my mind racing all the way to James's apartment. When I got there, the place was a mess. Looked like the aftermath of a tornado. Beer cans, pizza boxes, clothes all over the place. And there, on the couch, was James, sleeping like a baby in the middle of the day. "James!" I shouted, louder than I intended. He jolted awake, all bleary-eyed and confused. "Mom? What are you doing here?" he mumbled, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "I went to your college today. They told me you dropped out. Why didn't you tell us, James?" He looked away, then back at me. "I was gonna, I swear. Just, things got out of hand, and..." "Out of hand? James, we've been sending you money every month. Your father works hard for that money. And here you are, throwing parties and lying to us?" He tried to say something, then stopped. His eyes couldn't meet mine. "I'm sorry, Mom. I messed up." I left his apartment with my heart heavy and my mind in turmoil. That night, I told Thomas everything. He was upset, more than I'd seen him in years, but he didn't want to give up on James. "We'll get him back on track," he said, always believing there was a way to fix things. 5 long years rolled by just like that, filled with the same old song and dance. Ava, my daughter, she's the type to grab life by the horns. Worked her fingers to the bone, climbed that career ladder fast and never looked back. Saved every penny she could with her fiancé, Mike, and when it came time for them to tie the knot, they did it all on their own. It was a beautiful, modest ceremony, just like Ava. No fuss, all class. Then there's James. Still out there, floating like a leaf in the wind, looking for himself, as Thomas likes to say. He hopped from one job to another, all thanks to Thomas's buddies giving him chances he never quite caught hold of. After Ava's wedding, which James attended with a bored look plastered across his face most of the time, he dropped a bombshell on us. He was getting married too, and oh, you should have seen the girl he brought home. Lisa, her name was, and she was as sharp as a marble. Selfish? Sure. But James was smitten, or so he claimed. I wasn't too keen on her, to be honest. James, are you sure about this one? I asked him one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. Mom, Lisa's great, you just gotta get to know her better, he shot back, all defensive like I was attacking him. And just like that, they planned a wedding that could have been mistaken for a royal affair. Of course, they expected Thomas to foot the bill, which he did without even batting an eye. Thomas, can we talk? I cornered him one evening after the plans were underway. What's on your mind, Ellie? He asked, though I could tell he already knew. It's this wedding, Thomas. And everything else we keep paying for, James. When is enough, enough? I was nearly at my wit's end. He's our son, Ellie. We can't just cut him off, Thomas sighed, running his hands through his hair. I know he's our son, but look at Ava. She never asked for a dime. Worked for everything she has. Doesn't that tell you something? I could feel my voice rising, frustration boiling over. Eleanor, we've been over this. James is different. He needs more help, he said, his tone final, leaving no room for arguments. And so, the wedding happened. It was as grand as they come, leaving Thomas and me with a lighter wallet and me with a heavier heart. No sooner had the wedding bell stopped ringing than James was asking for more, this time an apartment and a monthly allowance to boot. Can you believe that? After all we've done already? I vented to Thomas one night. He's trying to start a new life with Lisa. They need our support, Thomas tried to justify, always the peacemaker. Support, Thomas? It's like we're funding a never-ending party for him, I snapped, unable to hold back my dismay. Despite my protests, Thomas went ahead and bought them an apartment. The monthly check started flowing soon after. Every time I signed one of those checks, a part of me wilted. I loved my son, God knows I do, but this was getting to be too much. Ava managed. Why can't he? I muttered under my breath every time I sealed an envelope. Life trudged on like this, me simmering with every check, every call for more money. Thomas and I had more than a few rounds about it. He'll settle down, Ellie, just you wait and see, he'd always say. But me? I wasn't too sure anymore. Something had to give, and I was beginning to worry it might be us. The day Thomas died was the day part of me died too. He was gone, just like that, a heart attack right in the middle of his workday. Nobody saw it coming. It hit me like a freight train, one minute he was there, the next, just a memory. I was shattered, barely holding the pieces together. Ava was my rock through it all. She took charge the way she always does, organizing the funeral, handling the calls, managing everything so I could just breathe. Or at least try to. I couldn't have gotten through those days without her. James? Well, he was another story. Showed up to his father's funeral looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Stood there with a face like he was waiting for a bus, not a tear in sight. And Lisa was right there beside him in a black dress that was anything but appropriate, eyes glued to her phone like it was just another day. The funeral was a blur, but I remember the weight of their stares, the whispers. It wasn't right. When everyone had left, the air thick with condolences and the scent of lilies, that's when James decided to stir up more trouble. Mom, we need to talk about Dad's property. I'm the heir. He always said so, James declared, his voice too loud for the somber mood of the house. I felt a rush of anger so fierce it nearly choked me. James, this is neither the time nor the place, I snapped, my voice cracking under the strain. Lisa piped up then, her tone sharp. Well, it's not just about the money. We're thinking about moving in here. Take charge, you know? Before I knew it, she was walking around the living room, touching this, moving that, as if she owned the place already. Some of these old things will have to go, of course. I stood there, stunned, watching her parade around my home. Over my dead body, you will. This is my house. I finally burst out. Lisa laughed, a nasty, grating sound. Well, that's only temporary, isn't it? The room spun a little at her words. Ava stepped in then, her voice calm but firm. Let's all take a step back. We can sit down in a few days and discuss everything like adults. But James wouldn't have it. No, we need to sort this now. Dad would have wanted me to have it sorted quickly. Ava looked at me, her eyes full of worry, and I knew she was in this fight with me. But standing there, in the echo of my husband's last footsteps through our home, my energy was fading fast. Fine. We'll talk about it now if we must, I said, the room going quiet. I've decided I'm moving into a nursing home. Thomas and I had it picked out long ago. James whipped out his phone and pulled up the website of the nursing home. After scrolling for a bit, he looked up, shaking his head. This place is a money pit, Mom. You're not wasting your savings living there. You'll live with us in this house. His wife made a face like she'd just bitten into a lemon, but then smoothed it over with a phony smile. Of course, you can stay with us. I mean, you'll help around with cooking and cleaning, right? The words stung, but before I could react, Ava leaned in close and whispered something in my ear. Her words were a quiet bombshell, one I couldn't believe at first. But she was serious, her eyes telling me to just trust her. Taking a deep breath, I straightened up and addressed them all. Actually, I won't be needing any inheritance. Ava and I have made our plans. I'll stay with her for now. Ava nodded, adding firmly, and I don't want any part of the inheritance either. We'll go to the notary tomorrow to make it official. James and Lisa exchanged a quick, greedy glance before breaking into wide grins. Well, if that's what you want, Mom, James said, barely concealing his delight. Lisa practically skipped to the kitchen to pop open a bottle of champagne. While they were celebrating in the next room, I slipped away to pack my things, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Ava was right beside me, helping to fold clothes and pack up my life in quiet solidarity. The next morning, Ava and I went to the notary. James and Lisa were already there, looking smug. We signed all the necessary papers. James could barely contain his glee, thinking he had won the lottery. Back at Ava's place, her husband, Mike, had prepared a warm welcome. The table was set with a good lunch and tea, making me feel cherished and safe. Mike gave me a comforting hug. Glad to have you here, he said, his smile genuine and warm. Living with Ava and Mike had been a balm to my worn spirit. Day by day, I found pieces of myself that had been lost in the chaos of grief and family drama. Ava was ever the caretaker, making sure I was comfortable, offering a listening ear, and just being there, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing so much. It was on a sunny Thursday morning, while I was enjoying a cup of coffee in the garden, that my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. Hello, Eleanor? This is Janet from Pine Grove Care Home. The voice was warm and professional. I'm calling to inform you that your place here is ready for you. I furrowed my brow, confusion washing over me. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't book a place at any care home. Oh, no mistake, ma'am. Your husband, Thomas, arranged for 2 lifetime places here in your name. Since his place is now vacated, you also have an option to receive a refund. The amount would be $200,000. My hand trembled as I held the phone, tears welling up in my eyes. Thomas had always been thoughtful, but this? This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Thank you, I managed to choke out, overwhelmed by his love even in his absence. I hung up and stared out at the garden, the flowers blooming with no care of the world's troubles, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. Ava noticed my tears when she came out to join me. "Mom, what's wrong? Who was that on the phone?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I wiped my eyes, looking up at her. That was the nursing home. Your father, he had made arrangements for us before he died. There's enough money for me to decide what I want to do without worrying. Ava sat down next to me, taking my hand in hers. That's amazing, Mom. But you know you don't have to go if you don't want to. You can stay here with us. We want you here. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her and Mike's generosity. I know, darling. And I appreciate it more than words can say. But your father chose that place with care, thinking of our health and future. They have excellent medical facilities, and honestly, it might be the best place for me to be. I think he'd want me to use it. We spent the rest of the day looking into what Pine Grove had to offer. It was one of the best in the state, with top-notch care, beautiful grounds, and plenty of activities. It wasn't just a nursing home, it was a community where I could thrive, not just survive. Looks like Dad really was thinking ahead, Ava remarked as we browsed through the photos of the facility online. He always did, didn't he? Always making sure we were okay. I replied, a small smile creeping through the tears. We decided to visit Pine Grove the following week, to see everything in person and make the arrangements if everything felt right. As we planned, I felt a strange peace settling over me, the kind that had been elusive since Thomas passed. It was a crisp morning, and the air in Ava's house was filled with a mix of cardboard and anticipation as we packed my belongings. That's when the peace was shattered by James and Lisa barging in, papers in hand and fury in their eyes. Mom, you've got to listen, this is serious. James was red-faced, waving documents like they were flags. I motioned for him to calm down. James, take a breath and explain what's going on, I said, trying to keep the room from spinning into chaos. It's Dad's loans, Mom. He took out loans for my wedding, the apartment, all secured against the house. And now, the bank wants their money. His voice was shrill, the panic clear in his eyes. Lisa chimed in, her voice shrill. There's no money left, Eleanor. You and Ava played us. Now they want to take everything. I couldn't help but smile, not out of amusement, but because of the absurdity of it all. Your father was a wise man, James. He invested in a nursing home for our future. Everything is in my name. As for the house, well, that's your inheritance now. James's face went from red to white. You need to give up that nursing spot, give us the money. We need it to cover these debts. Lisa was nearly hysterical. I took out loans for my surgery to look good for James. You owe us that money to help. Ava stood beside me, her demeanor calm but firm. The debts aren't Mom's concern, James. She signed over the house to you. That was your choice. I looked at both of them, my voice steady. I think you should consider selling the apartment you got as a gift. It could cover your debts. No. We plan to rent it out, make some income. James spat back, his desperation palpable. I shrugged, feeling a weight lift as I finally let go of the burden. Well, that's your decision, James. But as for me, I'm done. The house, the debts, you wanted the inheritance, it's all yours now. James looked like he was about to explode, and Lisa was no better, screeching about her financial woes until Mike stepped in, his voice thunderous. Enough. You can't come here and threaten my family. Get out. Mike's presence was enough to push James and Lisa out the door, their threats and shouts fading as they left. Ava closed the door behind them, her hand resting on the knob for a moment as if to seal away the chaos. I let out a long breath, feeling the final ties of obligation fall away. Ava looked at me, a mixture of concern and relief in her eyes. Are you okay, Mom? I am, darling. More than okay, I assured her, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm free of the house and the debts. Free of the constant demands. Your father's foresight gave me this freedom, and I'm going to enjoy it without guilt. We spent the rest of the day wrapping up my belongings, each item a memory, each box a step toward my new life. As I packed, I thought about Thomas, his last gift to me, freedom and peace. I was ready for the nursing home, ready for a community of my peers, ready to embrace whatever came next without the shadow of James's problems looming over me. Settling into the nursing home was like starting a new chapter of my life, one I never knew I needed. My apartment here at Pine Grove is more beautiful than I could have imagined. From my window, I can see the sprawling gardens, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets I'm now free to discover. It's funny, really, how life turns out. Just a few months ago, I was tangled up in family drama, worried sick about debts and inheritances. Now, I'm here, in this peaceful haven, hearing about the outside world as if it's a distant memory. One sunny afternoon, Ava came by for our usual walk in the park that borders the nursing home. These walks have become the highlight of my week. "So, how are things back home? How's Mike?" I asked as we strolled along the paved path, admiring the blooming flowers. "Mike's great, Mom. He's really been a rock through all this. And we've got some news. I'm pregnant." Ava beamed, her face glowing with joy. My heart swelled with happiness. "Oh, Ava, that's wonderful. I'm going to be a grandma." I hugged her, feeling an excitement I hadn't felt in ages. As we walked, we talked about her plans, about how she wanted to raise her child, and the laughter we'd share. It was a beautiful feeling, looking forward to life again. "And what about James? Heard from him lately?" I ventured gently, knowing that part of my heart was still tender where he was concerned. Ava sighed. "Yeah, I heard from a mutual friend. He and Lisa sold the apartment and the house to cover their debts. After everything was paid off, Lisa left him. Now he's living in a small rental and had to finally get a job." Sounds like he's learning some hard lessons," I said, not without a pinch of sadness for the son I once held in my arms, thinking the world was his oyster. "It's probably for the best, Mom. He's taking responsibility for himself now. It's what you always hoped for, right?" Ava squeezed my hand as we paused to watch a pair of ducks glide across the pond. "That's true, darling. I always did want him to stand on his own 2 feet. Maybe now he'll find his way," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and resignation. It was hard not to worry, but at least he was making his own path now. Ava changed the topic then, talking about the nursery she was planning, the colors and themes swirling in her creative mind. We laughed and planned, and for a while, I forgot all about the troubles of the past. Living in Pine Grove, I found a community that feels like family. We share stories, play games, and support each other. The staff here are wonderful, always making sure we're comfortable and cared for. It's more than I could have hoped for, and sometimes, I catch myself wishing Thomas could see me now, happy, at peace, and about to be a grandmother. I came into this world not with a cheer, but a burden. My mother, Elizabeth, wasn't ready for me, or maybe she just never wanted to be. It's hard to tell the difference when you're the unwanted one. From my first breath, I was more a problem than a person in her eyes. "You never stop crying, do you?" she would hiss during those long nights of my infancy. Her voice was often laced with irritation, lacking the gentle touch you'd expect from a mother. My father, Michael, was different. He was the one who stepped up, trading sleep for soothing walks with me in his arms, while my mother locked herself away in silence. "Let me take her, Liz," I remember him pleading one night, his voice as soft as the blankets he wrapped me in. "You need to rest." As I grew, the gap between my mother's affection and indifference widened, especially when Emily was born. Suddenly, there was light in my mother's eyes, but it wasn't for me. "Look at her, Michael. She's perfect," Mom cooed over Emily, something I never heard directed at me. The differences were stark. While Emily slept quietly in her arms, I was often left playing alone or trying to help around the house. "Why don't you be a good big sister and play quietly? Emily is sleeping." Mom would often chide when my footsteps or small voice crept a decibel too high. My role in the house grew as I got older. I wasn't just the elder sister, I was the helper, the cook, the cleaner, whatever kept me busy and out of the way. As time went on, I learned the art of invisibility at home. It was easier to blend into the background, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. By the time high school rolled around, I was more the family caretaker than their child. "Anna, make sure the laundry's done and dinner's ready by 6, Mom would command as she left with Emily for another shopping trip, their laughter a bitter sound as it faded down the hallway. "Yes, Mom," was always my reply, mechanical, rehearsed. At school, things were different. I was a good student, quiet but diligent. Teachers noticed me, praised me, something that never happened at home. They encouraged me, talked about potential and futures that seemed so distant from my reality. "Have you thought about college, Anna?" Mr. Henderson, my English teacher, once asked. His encouragement felt like a lifeline. "I'd like to, sir. I really would," I admitted, a flicker of hope stirring within. Those moments, rare and precious, were what fueled me. They made the long days and lonely nights bearable. They whispered of a life beyond the confines of my mother's cold indifference and the shadow of my sister's favored existence. A life where maybe, just maybe, I could be seen for who I was, not just for what I could do for others. By the time I graduated high school, I had my plan all mapped out. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple escape from a home that felt more like a prison. The day I turned 18, I packed my bags, mostly filled with second-hand clothes, and a few cherished books. "You really going through with this?" Dad asked, his face lined with worry as he watched me stuff a duffel bag. "Your mom's gonna flip, you know. She expects you to stick around, help out with the house, with Emily." I zipped up the bag with more force than necessary. "I know. But I can't stay here, Dad. I gotta try and make something of myself." I moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town, close enough to my new job at a local diner. The work was hard and the hours were long, but every paycheck was a step closer to my goal. The diner was a noisy, bustling place, filled with the clatter of dishes and the constant chatter of customers. I learned to keep my head down and my hands busy. Nights were spent in a cramped study corner of my apartment, textbooks spread out as I worked through community college applications. I was determined to be more than a waitress, more than what my mother said I'd be. "Why you both errand with all that school stuff?" my neighbor, Jo, once asked when she caught me buried in paperwork. "Ain't like it's gonna change much." "It might not," I admitted, "but it's worth a shot. I want to be a teacher, Jo. I want to do something meaningful." Jo snorted, dragging on her cigarette. "Well, good luck with that, kid. This world ain't kind to dreamers." Saving money became a game of numbers. Every tip went into a jar, every spare dollar tucked away for future tuition. I cut corners everywhere, lived on ramen and toast, and kept my eyes on the prize. After a year of relentless work and study, I had enough to enroll in college. I chose the local community college, affordable and within commuting distance. The day I received my acceptance letter, I felt a surge of pride like never before. Walking into my first class, I felt out of place with my worn-out jeans and second-hand textbooks, but I was there, in a seat, ready to learn. "You here for the early childhood education program?" a girl next to me asked, her pen tapping nervously on her notebook. "I'm Sarah. We should study together, maybe?" "Sure, Sarah. I'm Anna. I'd like that." College was a whole new world, one where I wasn't just the forgotten daughter or the hard-working waitress. I was a student, a peer, and soon, I found myself part of a community. Evenings were still spent at the diner, but now my days were filled with lectures, group projects, and a growing belief that I could really make this happen. I could become someone who made a difference. The path wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear that maybe Jo was right, that maybe the world wasn't kind to dreamers. But every time I helped a classmate understand a tough concept, or received praise from a professor, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. By the time my second year of college rolled around, I was deep into my studies and working the evening shift at the diner. One evening, as I balanced a tray full of burgers and shakes, my phone buzzed in my apron. It was an email from the college financial office. My heart skipped. This was it, the scholarship decision. I waited until my break, hands shaking as I logged in to read the email. "Congratulations," it began. "We are pleased to inform you." I didn't need to read the rest, I had done it. A full ride for the next year. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding and slid down against the wall, relief washing over me. The following weeks flew by in a blur of exams and late-night shifts. But with my financial worries eased, I was able to focus more on what I really loved, learning how to teach. As the semester ended, I started applying for teaching positions, each application sent with a mix of hope and nerves. One afternoon, while I was setting up for a job fair, my old classmate, Sarah, bumped into me. "Listen, are you still looking for a job? My aunt's school is looking for a new primary teacher. You should totally apply." I followed up on Sarah's tip and landed an interview. The night before, I practiced answers to possible questions in front of my mirror, determined to come off as confident and competent. The principal, Mr. Davis, was a stern-looking man who softened a bit as we talked. "Why do you want to work with children?" he asked, peering at me over his glasses. "Because I believe every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be." I walked out of there feeling like I had just won my second scholarship. A week later, I got the call. I was in. I was going to be a teacher. After years of working tirelessly as a teacher and constantly hitting the books at night to stay ahead, I decided it was high time to invest in a proper laptop. Walking into the tech store, I was more than a little out of my element. Rows of shiny, high-tech gadgets lined the walls, each one promising the world. I must have looked lost because a guy with a friendly smile and a name tag that read Tom approached me. "Need some help finding something?" he asked, his tone friendly. "Yeah, I'm looking for a laptop that can handle a lot of multitasking and won't give up on me in a year," I replied, hoping I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Tom nodded, showing me a few models and explaining the specs in a way that didn't go right over my head. "This one here would be perfect for what you need, and it's within budget." As he rang up the sale, he gave a casual, "You know, you seem really into your work. If you ever need tech advice, or any advice, really, here's my number." We started texting, casual at first, then daily. Dates followed, easy nights out where the laughter flowed as freely as the conversation. But whenever things edged towards serious, Tom was quick with the brakes. "We're still young, Anna. There's no rush," he'd say, every time I hinted at something deeper. I didn't push it. I was busy enough, and having someone even just to laugh with felt like a win. But then, one lazy Saturday morning, as I was enjoying my coffee and the rare chance to sleep in, my phone rang. It was Mom, which was unusual enough to spike my heartbeat. "Anna, it's your dad. He's really sick. You should come." The weight in her voice pulled me upright. "I'm on my way." Tom, sprawled on the couch, sat up. "Everything okay?" "It's my dad. I have to go see him. He's sick." "I'll come with you," he offered, and something in his tone made it clear he wasn't asking. We drove in silence, the tension thick. As we pulled up to the family house, his whistle cut through the quiet. "Damn, Anna, you didn't say you grew up in a mansion." "It's not as glamorous as it looks," I murmured, my stomach knotting up as we walked to the door. Inside, Mom and Emily were the picture of superficial concern. I introduced Tom, their smiles a little too polished. "Nice to finally meet the man making our Anna so happy," Mom cooed, her eyes appraising. "We were just talking about the future," Emily chimed in, eyeing Tom like a new accessory she might like to try. I barely listened, my focus on getting to Dad. He was propped up in bed, looking so frail it knocked the breath from me. "Anna, my girl," he rasped as I approached. "I'm sorry for everything." Tears stung my eyes, but I managed a smile. "It's okay, Dad. I'm here now. I should have been stronger. Should have stood up for you more. he continued, each word labored. We talked a little more until he drifted off, tired from the effort. I kissed his forehead and joined the others at dinner, Tom in tow. The conversation at the table turned quickly to money, inheritances, things that seemed so trivial with Dad's room just upstairs. Your father's made some smart investments, Mom was saying, her voice light, almost excited. It should keep us comfortable. Yeah, I've been looking at trips to Europe, Emily added, like she was picking out items from a catalog. Tom listened, nodding along, but I felt sick. Shouldn't we focus on Dad's health first? I interjected, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Oh, Anna, always so dramatic, Emily sighed. We have to be practical about the future. I wanted to argue, to scream that they were talking about Dad like he was already gone. But I bit my tongue, the words tasting like bile. We drove back to my place, the city lights blurring past as I let the distance from that house, from those people, slowly help me breathe easier. Coming back from that unsettling dinner at my parents' place, Tom seemed more contemplative than usual. We'd barely closed the door to my apartment when he turned to me, his expression serious. Anna, I've been thinking a lot lately, he began, running a hand through his hair. Marry me, Anna. The proposal was as unexpected as a thunderclap in clear skies. What? Tom, where is this coming from? I know it's sudden, he admitted, stepping closer. But today, seeing everything. I just know I want to be there for you, for good. We don't need anything big, just us, together. His words, sincere and raw, cut through the confusion. I loved him, that much was clear. And maybe, just maybe, he was the solid thing I could hold on to. Okay, yes, I said, the decision feeling right despite the chaos of my thoughts. We didn't wait. The very next week, we stood together at City Hall, exchanging simple vows in a quiet room. No frills, no grand speeches, just a promise to each other. But even the warmth of new marriage couldn't shield me from the concern for my father. His health was deteriorating, each visit painting a starker picture than the last. One afternoon, as I sat beside his bed, holding his hand while he dozed, he stirred and looked at me with a clarity that had become rare. Anna, he murmured, squeezing my hand. When I'm gone, there'll be something for you. A surprise. I brushed his hair back from his forehead, smiling to ease his worries. Dad, don't talk like that. You need to focus on getting better. But he shook his head gently. Just know that I did what I could. His words hung between us, heavy and somber. I chose not to press him, thinking it was the illness speaking, his mind fogged by medication and pain. Leaving his room that day felt harder than ever. At home, Tom tried to comfort me, but the image of my father's frail form haunted me. Meanwhile, Mom and Emily's conversations about the future grew more frequent and filled with cold calculations. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen while I was supposed to be out. The medical bills are piling up, and with your father like this, well, it's not sustainable, Mom was saying, her voice laced with impatience. I've already signed up for plastic surgery to find a new boyfriend. Emily responded, her tone just as calculating. We need to think about what comes next. I want that new car that you and I saw in the salon. Frustrated and heartbroken, I left them to their scheming. Back at my place, Tom held me close as I cried, my tears for my father, for the family I wished I had. The day we buried my father was cold and gray, the sky mourning with us as friends and relatives came to pay their respects. That evening, the family gathered at my parents' house. The air was thick with tension, everyone too aware of the elephant in the room, the inheritance. I was emotionally drained and wanted nothing more than to honor my father's memory in peace, but that wasn't to be. Tom was the first to break the silence about the will. So, what's going to happen now with the inheritance? We need to know what we're dealing with here, he said, his tone a bit too casual for the occasion. I shot him a look, my heart sinking. Tom, can we not do this right now? Today isn't about money. But he pressed on, oblivious or indifferent to my discomfort. I'm just saying, it's important. I mean, shouldn't the house go to Anna? It's only fair. My mother, who had been quietly listening, laughed dryly. Fair? This house has always belonged to Emily and me. You two were just passing through. Tom's face hardened, and he turned to my sister. Emily, you know this isn't right. Anna deserves her share. Emily, looking more interested than she had all evening, fluttered her eyelashes at Tom. Oh, Tom, you always think of others. But Mom's right, as usual. The conversation spiraled, voices raised in a bitter symphony. I felt sick listening to them, the words melding into a cacophony of greed. How could a day of mourning turn so quickly into a scramble for wealth? As they argued, Tom's attitude shifted, his earlier support for me fading as he began to compliment Emily on her sensible outlook. Watching him sidle up to my sister, something in me snapped. I couldn't stomach another minute of it. I fled to my father's room, the one place that still held traces of his presence, and collapsed into a restless sleep. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of coffee and found Tom in the kitchen. His expression was grave, a stark contrast to the light banter of just days before. Anna, we need to talk, he began, avoiding my gaze. I'm in love with Emily. I think she and I have a future together. The room spun a little, his declaration landing like a physical blow. You're what? Tom, are you serious? Before he could answer, I called Emily and Mom to join us. Emily came down, looking smug, while Mom watched with a curious eye. I just wanted you to hear it from me first, Emily said, her tone infuriatingly calm. I'm a decent person, Anna. I didn't want to go behind your back. Mom nodded, her approval evident. It's very noble of you, Emily. To be so upfront about this. Their words, their betrayal, it was too much. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me. You all deserve each other, I said quietly. Tom extended the divorce papers toward me, a pen poised. Without hesitation, I signed, each stroke of my name severing the ties that bound us. You'll get your things through a courier. Don't come back. With that, I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and didn't look back. I was free now, and with that freedom, a new path lay open. A path I would walk alone, but at least it was mine, honest and unencumbered. 2 weeks later, we all got back together in the notary's sterile office, about to hear the reading of my father's will. The air was tense, thick with unspoken accusations and bitter expectations. Mom and Emily were chatting in hushed, anxious tones, while Tom looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat next to Emily. The notary, Mr. Clarkson, a severe-looking man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, cleared his throat and began reading the will. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, bracing for whatever came next. To my daughter Anna, Mr. Clarkson read, his voice neutral. I leave the sum of $400,000. The room went silent for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. Mom's face turned a shade of red I knew too well as her financial desperation spilled out. I have debts, Anna. Your father knew. He promised he'd take care of us, she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. Emily joined in, her voice sharp and accusing. And what about me? I'm getting married to Tom. We need that money for a proper wedding. You don't need all that money, Anna. I stared at them, the sheer audacity rendering me momentarily speechless. Tom, meanwhile, tried to play the affection card, stepping toward me with open arms. I've missed you, Anna. I've made a mistake. I only ever loved you. Before he could reach me, Emily yanked him back by the shirt, her eyes wide with betrayal. Tom, what are you doing? He tried to wriggle free from her grasp, but Emily's grip was tight, her nails practically digging into his skin. Enough, Mr. Clarkson's voice boomed through the room, louder than I'd ever heard. If you cannot behave in a civilized manner, I will have to ask you to leave. And if necessary, I will call the police. The threat of authority seemed to pierce through the chaos, bringing a sudden, sullen silence to the room. Mom and Emily, with crocodile tears streaming down their faces, turned to me once more. Anna, please, my mother begged, her voice softening to a manipulative whisper. Think of your family. Emily, still clinging to Tom, echoed her plea. We're your family, Anna. Don't we mean anything to you? Looking at them, at their false tears and desperate faces, something inside me hardened. These were not the actions of a family, they were the actions of vultures dressed in familiar skins. No, I said firmly, my voice steady, despite the shaking of my hands. This money is what Dad wanted me to have. He knew I would use it wisely, not squander it on debts or lavish weddings. Tom, Emily, and Mom stared back, a mixture of shock and indignation written across their faces. You'll regret this, Anna. You won't be happy with this money, Mom hissed as I turned to leave. Maybe, I replied, pausing at the door. But I'd rather find that out on my own, without any of you. As I stepped into the sunlight, the cool air felt like the first breath of a new life, one where I was no longer bound by the toxic ties of those who shared my blood but not my values. I used the money to open a small private kindergarten. It was something I'd dreamed of, a place where children could feel loved and valued, the way I wished I had felt growing up. The process wasn't easy. There were permits to obtain, a property to renovate, curriculums to design, and staff to hire. But every step felt right. I named it Bright Beginnings, a nod to the new start it represented for me and the children we would serve. Business was good, better than I had hoped. Parents loved our approach, and word of mouth spread. Soon, we were at full capacity, and I began planning an expansion. One day, while reviewing blueprints with my assistant, Jenny, my phone buzzed with an update from a name I hadn't seen in a while, Rachel, a mutual acquaintance of my family. Hey Anna, thought you should know, your mom and Emily sold the house. They had to move out of town, ended up in a small place. Not much left after settling their debts. She texted. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Thanks for the update, Rachel. I typed back, a mix of emotions swirling through me. As the days turned into weeks, Bright Beginnings grew not just in size, but in reputation. It was during this busy time that Tom reappeared, as unexpectedly as he had exited my life. I was returning from a meeting when I found him standing outside my apartment, a huge bouquet in his hands and that same charming smile plastered on his face. Anna, hey, I've been thinking about you, he said as I approached, trying to hand me the flowers. I stopped short, my keys in my hand, an incredulous laugh escaping me. Really, Tom? After everything, you think flowers will fix it? Come on, Anna. I made a mistake. Can we talk? His voice was coaxing, his smile faltering just a bit. I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I saw was the same selfishness, the same opportunism. No, Tom. We can't. There's nothing for you here. He lingered for a moment, the smile finally slipping off his face as he realized I was serious. Then, with nowhere left to push, he turned and left, the discarded flowers lying wilted by my doorstep. The next few months flew by. Bright Beginnings became not just a daycare, but a cornerstone of the community. We hosted family events, workshops for parents, and continued to expand our services. As I watched the children play in the newly added outdoor play area, their laughter ringing clear and true, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. I had built something lasting, something meaningful. Life before Michael was pretty straight-laced. Wake up, trade a bit on the stock exchange, head to my job in online advertising, then rinse and repeat. Simple, mundane, but it was mine. I always figured that someday I'd add a family to the mix, husband, kids, the whole shebang. I met Michael at a seminar for amateur traders. He was a speaker, all confidence and broad smiles, talking about big moves in the real estate market. After his talk, we ended up at the same coffee station. Strong coffee, strong investments, right? He joked, pouring himself a cup. Something like that. But I usually go for less volatile stocks myself, I replied, trying to sound more savvy than I felt. Oh, playing it safe, huh? I like taking a bit more risk, he said with a wink. That wink should have been my first warning, but who was I to know? We started seeing each other, and things moved fast, swept up in romance and the excitement of it all. He was 10 years older, had his life figured out, or so it seemed. Loads of charm, money, and promises that came easy to him. About a year into our whirlwind romance, Michael popped the question on a chilly evening, right there on the balcony of his fancy high-rise apartment. "Marry me, Sarah. I want all my tomorrows to start with you," he said, holding out a ring that was frankly too flashy for my taste. But who was I to complain? It felt like a dream. 2 days before the wedding, Michael dropped another surprise, just as we were finalizing our dinner menu. "We need to talk about something, Sarah. It's important," he said, serious all of a sudden. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, figuring it was just some last-minute guest list drama. "I think we should sign a prenuptial agreement," he said, avoiding my eyes. "A prenup? Now? 2 days before the wedding?" I was shocked, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" "It's just practical, Sarah. It's not about us, it's about protecting what we've got. You know, just in case. I've got a lot tied up in real estate, and you're doing well with your trading. It's just standard stuff. My lawyer drafted something up. He says it's pretty standard, protects both of us." His casual dismissal stung. "Standard for who, Michael? Your lawyer? I don't even have one." "Look, he's a good guy. He'll take care of everything, even talk you through it." "On me, of course. I'll pay for it," he added quickly, as if that would smooth everything over. I remember standing there in his kitchen, feeling like a complete outsider in what was supposed to be my future home, with my future husband who suddenly seemed like a stranger. But I was too deep in, too embarrassed to call anything off, and honestly, too scared to start over. So, I caved. "Fine. Let's just get this over with," I muttered, feeling a mix of defeat and anger boiling inside. "Great, I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow. You'll see, it's all standard stuff," Michael assured me, but his reassurances felt hollow. The next day, his lawyer, a slick guy named Ron, walked me through the document. "It's all very straightforward," Ron assured me, flipping through pages that might as well have been written in another language. "You keep what's yours, he keeps his. Clean and simple." Clean and simple, right. If only I knew then just how complicated things would get. After the whirlwind of the wedding, which honestly was more of a blur of faces and congratulations than anything, Michael and I settled into what you could call married life. But even that felt more like living with a charming roommate than a husband, what with all the terms we'd signed off on. Michael's life was a series of business calls and trips. "Gotta keep the wheels turning, Sarah," he'd say, kissing my forehead before jetting off to some city or another. I mostly stayed back, working from home, trading stocks like it was my lifeline. It wasn't the family life I'd pictured, but then again, what was? His business was booming, and my trading wasn't doing too bad either. But whenever I brought up maybe putting my earnings into buying a place for me, Michael had his own ideas. "Hold off on that, babe. I'm eyeing a new property, could use a bit more liquidity," he'd say, always planning the next big purchase. One evening, he came home more stressed than usual. "Market's brutal, babe. Got a loan coming up due that I totally spaced on," he admitted over a too-late dinner. "Can't you roll it over or something?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. "That's the kicker. It's tied up with my other assets. Bit of a cash flow snag," he explained, sounding tired. Suddenly he remembered my savings, the ones I'd been hoping to put towards a house, maybe start that dream family. "You could help," he said slowly. "I mean, it'll ease the snag." Michael looked at me then pleadingly, really looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. "Okay, I'll do it. What's mine is yours," I said, echoing the words he hadn't exactly said but had implied in so many ways. Right, of course, babe. It's just until this thing smooths over. I'll pay you back," he promised, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and love. Love because I believed in us, in him. Apprehension because, deep down, I knew money and love were a messy mix. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months. Michael's promises of repayment became as frequent as his business trips, mentioned but never fulfilled. Our conversations about it were circular, always ending with him kissing my forehead and promising, "Soon, babe, soon." And me? I believed him every time. Or at least, I wanted to. Because confronting the truth, that this was becoming less of a marriage and more of a business arrangement, was a reality I wasn't ready to face. The arrival of our son, Jack, was supposed to be the happiest time in our lives, but it quickly turned into one of the most challenging. Michael was often away on business trips, leaving me to juggle the baby, household duties, and my own work. I wasn't just riding the emotional roller coaster of a new mom, I was doing it pretty much on my own. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of balancing Jack on my hip while trading on my laptop, I broached a topic that had been weighing on me. "Michael, I was thinking, maybe we could get a little help? Like a nanny?" I suggested tentatively over dinner. Michael, who had just returned from a trip to Chicago, looked up from his plate, eyebrows raised. "A nanny? Sarah, come on, we agreed you'd handle home stuff. Jack needs his mom, not some stranger." "But I'm also trying to work, Michael. The trading doesn't just happen by itself, and it's our livelihood too," I countered, feeling the frustration bubble up inside. "You're doing fine. What, you want a medal for doing what you're supposed to do?" His tone was dismissive, and it stung more than I expected. "You knew what you were signing up for. I'm out earning, you're home with the kid. We're both doing our parts, right?" As weeks turned into months, the financial strain began to show. Michael stopped transferring money to our joint account, leaving me to handle all the expenses, the taxes on the house, the car payments, groceries, clothes, everything for Jack. It wasn't just the physical toll, the financial juggle was becoming a nightmare. One night, after paying the latest batch of bills and realizing my account was running dangerously low, I confronted Michael. He had just come back from another trip and was in a surly mood. "Michael, the joint account is dry. I had to use my savings to cover everything these last few months. When can you transfer some money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He scoffed, tossing his keys on the table. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You live in my house, drive my car, and you're still complaining? You should be grateful." "Grateful? Michael, I am managing everything here while you're gone. I'm not asking for thanks, but I need support," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "Look, I'm dealing with a lot right now. The business needs every penny." "You're not the only one with pressures, Sarah," he retorted before heading off to the shower, effectively ending the conversation. It was clear I was on my own. I couldn't rely on Michael, I needed to ensure financial security for myself and Jack. That's when I threw myself into stock trading more seriously. Each day, after Jack fell asleep, I'd stay up, researching and making trades. Slowly, my account began to grow, bolstered by a series of successful deals. Keeping this a secret from Michael felt wrong, but necessary. He had made it clear that his money was his. Well, mine would be mine. I set up a separate account he didn't know about, moving my trading profits there. It was the only slice of independence I felt I could cling to. Jack was growing up fast, and with him, the daily logistics were becoming more complicated. The old car we had was barely hanging on, not nearly spacious enough for his stroller and all the paraphernalia that seemed necessary whenever we stepped out the door. One morning, while Michael was sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, I brought up the topic. "I need a new car, Michael. The trunk in this one just isn't cutting it for Jack's stuff." He didn't look up from his screen. "And you're telling me this why? Planning to make me pay for it?" "No, I've got it covered. I've been saving up from trading," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed as he put down his phone. "Oh, you've got money, huh? Well, that's great because I need some cash. The business could use a boost right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Again with the money? What about the money I lent you before? You promised to pay that back, and you haven't." I need a car for Jack, not to sink more into your endless business needs. He shrugged, a smirk forming. Business is what keeps us living in style, Sarah. You should know that by now. Help me out, and I'll get you a new car later. I stood my ground this time. No, Michael, no more. I need to take care of our son. I'm buying the car with or without your help. For a moment, he looked shocked, like he couldn't believe I was defying him. Then his expression hardened. Fine, how about this? If you're so set on this path, maybe we shouldn't be together. You want to split? Because trust me, you won't get a dime in the divorce. Remember that prenup you signed? His words were like a slap. I knew the prenup was there, but his threat to use it so bluntly was still a shock. If that's how you see our marriage, then maybe a divorce is the best thing, I said quietly, the reality of our crumbling relationship hitting me all at once. Fine by me. But remember, you leave with what you came with, nothing. And you'll need to find a new place to live. Consider this your 3-day notice, he said coldly, pulling out a drawer and tossing the prenuptial agreement on the table between us. I glanced at the document, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. You think you can just throw me and Jack out like we're nothing? I've been here through everything, supporting you, never asking for anything more than what I put into this family. He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. You think any of that matters? I've got the best lawyers. Don't try to fight me, Sarah. You'll lose. And don't think about taking anything from here, or I'll sue. Packing was a blur of tears and determination. I collected mine and Jack's belongings, leaving behind everything that Michael could claim as his. I wasn't going to give him any reason to come after me legally. The apartment I found was small, but it was ours, and it was close to Jack's kindergarten, which made life a little easier. Every day, as I walked him to school, I felt a bit more grounded, a bit more like I could do this, raise my son and rebuild our lives. The stock market became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I traded with a ferocity born of necessity, the need to provide for Jack and keep us afloat without any help from Michael. Nights were the hardest, after Jack went to bed and the world quieted down. That's when the doubts and the loneliness crept in. But every time I wanted to give in to despair, I'd look at the numbers climbing in my account, and I'd find the strength to keep pushing. Divorce proceedings were as cold and swift as Michael's farewell. The prenuptial agreement held up, leaving me with nothing but child support, which was a pittance compared to what Michael made. He fought dirty, too, throwing around threats to take Jack if I pushed for any of the money I'd lent him for that so-called urgent loan. It was during one of those mornings, dropping Jack off at kindergarten, that I met Laura. She was the mother of Emily, a little girl with a wild mop of curls and a laugh that could light up a room. Laura and I hit it off immediately, often finding ourselves chatting long after the kids had scampered off to their morning activities. One sunny afternoon, as we watched our kids play, Laura turned to me, her expression curious. You always seem so together, Sarah. How do you do it? I mean, I struggle, and it's just me. I shrugged, my eyes on Jack, who was busy constructing a sandcastle. I guess you just learn to cope, you know? Keep pushing through. We talk about everything and nothing, movies, books, our wild dreams of vacations in exotic places. But I never brought up Michael or the divorce. That part of my life was locked away, a chapter 1 was determined to close. One day, as we watched Jack and Emily scramble up the steps of a slide, Laura nudged me gently. You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Us single moms have to stick together. I smiled, the warmth from her offer spreading through me. Thanks, Laura. That means a lot. After a particularly good day on the stock exchange, I felt a rare surge of optimism. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the win, or maybe I just needed a change of scenery from the usual routine. Whatever it was, I called up Laura and suggested dinner at a new restaurant downtown. Sounds like a celebration is in order. What's the occasion? Laura asked as we settled into our seats at the chic, softly lit venue. Just a good day at work, I replied, trying to keep it casual, but inside I was buzzing. It felt like things were finally looking up. As we sipped on our drinks and chatted about mundane things like kindergarten antics and weekend plans, I felt the weight of the past months lighten a bit. But just as I was beginning to relax, a familiar voice chilled the air around us. Well, if it isn't Sarah. Looking a bit rough, aren't we? Michael's voice was unmistakable. I looked up to see him standing there, smirking, with a woman clinging to his arm. I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger. "Michael," I greeted stiffly, wishing the earth would swallow me whole. "And this is Vanessa, my fiancée. Isn't she just stunning?" Vanessa gave a tight-lipped smile, eyeing me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Yes, Michael always did have a taste for, well, never mind. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." Michael leaned in, lowering his voice, though not his malice. "Seriously, Sarah, you look like you've aged a decade. What happened to you?" I remained silent, not trusting myself to speak without my voice shaking. Laura, however, was not about to let it slide. "Sarah's doing just fine, better even. Looks to me like life's treating her well." Michael snorted, giving me a final sneering look before turning away. "Come on, Vanessa, let's leave the past where it belongs." After they left, Laura turned to me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. "What was that all about? He's awful. And who talks like that?" Taking a deep breath, I filled her in on the brief version of my marriage, the high hopes, the prenup, the threats, the fallout. Everything spilled out in a low, hurried stream. Laura's eyes widened with every detail. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were dealing with all that? And a prenup?" "I'm a family lawyer, you know. I want to see that prenup. There could be something there, some way to challenge it." A few days later, I was in Laura's office, handing over the dusty documents that had sealed my fate. She pored over them with a furrowed brow, her pen flying over the pages as she made notes. "Sarah, there are several issues here," she finally said, looking up from the papers. "First, this was signed too close to the wedding. It's a pressure tactic. Second, you didn't have independent legal advice, which is huge. And third, he didn't disclose all his financial obligations, like that loan you ended up covering. That's misrepresentation." My heart raced as she laid out each point. "It means," Laura continued with a smile, "that we might just be able to challenge this. We've got a real shot here, Sarah." Sitting in the cold, stark courtroom, my hands were trembling, despite my best efforts to appear calm. The weight of what was at stake pressed heavily upon me, not just the potential financial outcome, but the deeper, more personal vindication against Michael's long-standing control and threats. Before the judge had even called the session to order, Michael leaned towards me from where he stood a few paces away. His voice was low, a venomous whisper meant only for me. "You're a loser, Sarah. You can never beat me. I'll ruin you. And when I'm done, I'll take Jack from you too." Laura, standing by my side, gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze before we were called to present our case. As the proceedings began, Laura was methodical and fierce. She laid out the facts, pointing to the rushed nature of the prenuptial agreement signing and the glaring lack of independent legal counsel. She highlighted the financial disclosures that Michael had conveniently omitted, which directly impacted the terms of the prenup. "Your Honor, the agreement my client was coerced into signing was not only unfair but fundamentally flawed in its execution," Laura argued passionately. "We have clear grounds here to question its validity." Michael's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that everything had been above board, that I was merely having regrets after the fact. But Laura dismantled his points with precise legal references and the undeniable weight of evidence she'd compiled. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. "After reviewing the evidence and the circumstances under which the prenuptial agreement was signed, I am ruling to annul the agreement due to significant violations in its execution." The courtroom seemed to spin for a moment. Laura turned to me, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "We did it, Sarah," she whispered. Michael's reaction was instantaneous. His face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before as he stood up, his chair clattering behind him. "This isn't over. You won't get a dime from me," he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The judge warned him to settle down, but Michael's fury was palpable. As we left the courthouse, he followed, his threats spewing out like venom. I turned on my dictaphone and let it record every bitter word, every promise of revenge. "You'll regret this, Sarah. I'll make sure of it," he hissed as we walked down the courthouse steps. Later, at the police station, I played the recording. An officer took notes, his expression growing increasingly concerned with each threat uttered. "We'll give him a warning. He's not to contact you or approach you. Any further incidents, and we'll take more serious action," he promised. As I left the police station, the legal documents confirming my ownership of 2 city center apartments and several commercial properties securely in my bag, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Over $2 million in assets, it was almost impossible to comprehend. But more than the financial security, it was the freedom from Michael's shadow that felt like my true victory. The passive income from renting out real estate was more than enough to provide for Jack and me, and it allowed me to cut back on the frantic trading that had consumed so much of my time. These days, I spend a lot more time with Jack. He's growing up fast, and every moment with him feels precious. We often visit the park, and I watch him play, his laughter mingling with the breeze. One sunny afternoon, as Jack played on the swings, Laura joined us, her daughter Emily in tow. She plopped down on the bench next to me, a smile spreading across her face. "You look good, Sarah. Really good. Like a weight's been lifted," she observed, handing me a cup of coffee she'd picked up on her way. "Thanks, Laura. It feels that way, too," I replied, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. "I'm thinking about buying a house, you know, a real home for Jack and me. Something with a garden, maybe even a place for a dog." As we talked, the conversation shifted to Michael and how dramatically things had changed. Laura kept up with the legal community grapevine, which had plenty to say about my ex-husband's downfall. Word is, Michael's not doing so well. His new fiancée, Vanessa, left him, and a lot of his business partners have pulled back. They don't want to be associated with his reputation after the trial, Laura said, not hiding her disdain. I nodded, not surprised, but relieved I was no longer part of that drama. "I heard about Vanessa. Can't say I'm surprised she didn't stick around. Michael's true colors are hard to live with." The idea of Michael's downfall didn't bring me joy, but there was a sense of justice in seeing someone who had done so much harm finally face the consequences of his actions. I was just glad to be out of the storm and into calmer waters. Our conversation drifted to lighter topics, upcoming school events, vacation plans, and community activities. Normal life stuff, the kind I had longed for during all those tumultuous years. Later that day, after Emily and Laura had left, Jack and I walked home, his small hand in mine. "Mom, can we really get a dog?" he asked, his eyes wide with hope. "Yeah, buddy, we can." I smiled down at him. "We'll have a big yard for him to play in, and you can help pick him out." Jack's excitement was infectious, and as we talked about what kind of dog we might get, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the new life we were able to build. It was a far cry from the uncertainty and strife of the past years. I no longer looked over my shoulder, worried about what Michael might do next. Instead, I looked forward, to house viewings, to Jack's laughter filling a home that was truly ours, to new memories made in a garden under the sun, and to the simple joy of picking out our new dog. Hey there, I'm Ella. I'm a nurse, been one for a good few years now, working my shifts at the city clinic. Not the most glamorous gig, but it pays the bills, and I like helping folks. So, there I was, clipboard in hand, when this guy walks in. His name's Tom, and he's got his dad with him, an older gent who seemed a bit out of sorts. Tom looked all sorts of worried, his eyes scanning the busy waiting room like he was lost. Seeing him like that, I figured he needed a hand. "Hey, can I help you guys?" I called out as I approached them. Tom turned to me with a relieved look. "Oh, thank goodness. We're trying to find Dr. Lewis's office. Dad's got an appointment, and this place is a maze. I smiled, gesturing for them to follow. You're not wrong there. Come on, I'll take you there. As we walked, his dad, who introduced himself as George, kept quiet, just shuffling along with us. Tom, on the other hand, chatted away. Dad's been a bit under the weather, and we've been worried. No worries, you've done the right thing bringing him in. How long has he been feeling off? I asked, trying to get a sense of how urgent the situation was. A couple of weeks now. Just hasn't been himself, you know? I nodded, understanding the anxiety that comes with seeing a parent unwell. Yeah, I get that. It's tough. But you're doing a great job looking after him. Tom gave a half smile, clearly appreciating the support. Thanks, Ella. I'm just trying to do my best. By then, we had reached the office, and I opened the door for them. Here you go. Dr. Lewis will take good care of your dad. I waved goodbye and headed back to my station, feeling good about helping them out. Little did I know, that brief encounter would be just the beginning of something new for me. Tom's kind face and genuine concern for his dad stuck with me. It's not every day you meet someone who genuinely radiates kindness. Back at the nurse's station, my colleague Jess nudged me. Looked like you just made a new friend. Focus on your work, Jess, I teased, but I couldn't help the smile that lingered on my face as I thought about Tom's kind eyes and easy smile. It turned out, that wasn't the last I'd see of Tom. He'd pop in now and then, sometimes with his dad, sometimes with questions, or even just to say hi. Each visit, our chats got longer, laughter a bit louder, and I found myself looking forward to those unexpected moments. Months rolled by since that first help I gave Tom and his dad at the clinic. Who knew that a simple gesture would spark something that felt a bit like those cheesy romance tales? But here we were, Tom and I, finding excuses to meet up for coffee, turning those short visits into long evenings filled with chatter and laughter. One chilly evening, as we sat in our usual spot at the corner cafe, wrapped up in our warmest jackets, Tom's face got all serious, a look I wasn't used to. Ella, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, he started, fiddling with his coffee cup. I raised an eyebrow, curious and a bit anxious. I was wondering, what do you think about us, making this official? Like, actually dating? I couldn't help but laugh, not at him, but at the sheer relief washing over me. Tom, I thought you'd never ask. I'd like that, a lot. Tom's folks owned a small laundry business, something they were mighty proud of. It was their life's work, right next to their home. One Sunday, Tom invited me over for dinner to meet his parents, Nancy and George. The nerves hit me like a truck. Meeting the parents was a big deal, especially when your boyfriend had described his mom as particular and his dad as old school. The house was cozy, filled with the warm, soapy scent of freshly laundered clothes. Nancy was in the kitchen, bustling around with pots and pans, while George sat in the living room, newspaper in hand. Mom, this is Ella, Tom introduced me as we stepped into the kitchen. Nancy eyed me up and down, a hard-to-read expression on her face. Nice to meet you, Ella. Tom tells us you're a nurse? That's right, Mrs. Johnson. At the city clinic, I replied, offering a smile, hoping to break through her stern exterior. A nurse, eh? Must be tough, what with all the hours. Ever think about a more stable job? Her tone wasn't exactly welcoming, more like she was sizing me up for something. I felt a sting at her words, but kept my cool. I love what I do, Mrs. Johnson. It's rewarding, and I manage the hours just fine. Dinner was a mix of awkward silences and tough questions from Nancy. George mostly stayed quiet, occasionally throwing in a word or two, mostly about the laundry business. It was clear they were proud of their work, and they hinted more than once how they hoped Tom would take over soon. Ella, our laundry is a family business. Tom here has been a part of it since he was a boy. We'd love for him to run it full-time. Maybe you could join him, make it a real family affair, George said, passing the mashed potatoes. Tom quickly jumped in, seeing my discomfort. Dad, Ella's got her career, and she's really good at it. We're just taking things as they come, right? I nodded, grateful for his support, but the message was clear. They wanted their son tied to home, and maybe they expected the same from me. As we left that night, Tom apologized for his mom's hard edge. She's protective, you know? But she'll come around, I hope. I squeezed his hand, unsure of what the future held but certain about one thing. I wasn't ready to give up my scrubs for a laundry apron, not for anyone. We decided on a small wedding, nothing fancy, just close friends and family. One crisp Saturday morning, as we planned our modest reception, Tom's phone rang. He looked at it, frowned, and stepped out to take the call. When he came back, his face was ashen. "My dad, he's had a stroke. We need to go, now." The wedding plans got shoved to the back burner as we rushed to the hospital. The next few days were a blur of doctors, waiting rooms, and coffee that tasted like burnt tar. Tom was a wreck, and I did my best to support him, putting on a brave face while my heart ached for him. George didn't make it. The funeral was a week later, a somber affair with too many people saying how he was in a better place. I stood by Tom, holding his hand, feeling the weight of his grief. After the funeral, Nancy was a shadow of herself, quieter and more withdrawn. That's when Tom dropped the bombshell. "Ella, I need to be there for my mom. She shouldn't be alone right now. I was thinking, maybe we should move in with her, just for a while, until she gets back on her feet." The idea of living with Nancy, in that house that felt more like a business than a home, made my stomach turn. But I saw the desperation in Tom's eyes, and I loved him, so I agreed. And yet, first of all, we went to the mayor's office and legitimized our relationship, without a lavish ceremony and a white dress. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. The move was hectic. Between packing up our stuff and trying to comfort a grieving mother-in-law, I barely had time to process my own feelings. Nancy wasn't exactly warm, it was her house, and she made sure we knew it. "Ella, make sure those boxes go in the storage room. We need to keep the hallway clear," she instructed the day we moved our last suitcase in. "Of course, Nancy. We'll handle it," I replied, trying to keep the peace. Life at Nancy's was tough. She had her ways of doing things, and didn't appreciate deviation. I tried to help, to fit into this new, uncomfortable routine, but everything I did seemed to bother her. Tom was caught between us, trying to mediate but mostly just sinking deeper into his own sadness. He spent long hours at the laundry, avoiding the tension at home. I felt alone, surrounded by his family's memories and my growing resentment. "Ella, why are you still working at that clinic? You should focus on helping here, with the family business," Nancy said one night as we cleared the dinner table. "Nancy, I like my job. It's important to me," I responded, the fatigue and frustration making my voice sharper than I intended. She sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of disappointment. "I just don't see why you'd choose that over family." Lying in bed that night, listening to Tom's uneven breaths, I wondered how long we could keep this up. How long before the weight of his mother's expectations crushed the life we wanted to build together? My job at the clinic was on the other side of the city, which meant my days started in the dark and ended in it too. The commute was a beast, eating up hours I didn't have, and every trip felt longer than the last. Coming home was no relief. Nancy had a sharp eye for anything done less than perfect. I'd barely stepped through the door before the critique started. "Ella, you've left streaks on the window again. Do it over," she'd snap, barely looking up from her knitting. "And this soup is bland. Didn't I show you how to season it?" she'd add at dinner, making a face as if she'd tasted something sour. I tried, really tried, to brush it off and keep the peace, but it wore me down. Even Tom, my supposed partner in all this, started echoing his mom. "Ella, Mom's right. You could be a bit more careful with the cleaning, and the cooking," he'd say, not meeting my eyes. It stung, hearing that from him, like I was failing some test I didn't sign up for. Our home felt less like ours, and more like I was an unwelcome guest who couldn't do anything right. One day, after a particularly rough shift at the clinic where I'd stayed late to cover for a coworker, earning me a small bonus, I came home with an idea. I was dead on my feet, but excited to share it with Tom. "Babe, I got a little bonus at work today. We've both been under so much stress. Why don't we take a short vacation? Just a few days. We deserve a break," I suggested, hoping for a moment of connection. Tom looked up from the bills he was sorting, his face unreadable. "That sounds great, babe, but I can't just leave the laundry. Mom can't handle it alone." "It's just a few days, Tom. She can manage, or we could call in some temporary help." I pushed back, needing something to feel normal again. Before Tom could reply, Nancy walked into the room, having caught the tail end of our conversation. Her face was set in a hard line. "A vacation? And leave me to deal with everything here? You think I'm just your backup plan, Ella? That's heartless, even cruel," Nancy snapped, her voice cold. "I'm not your servant, ready to pick up slack so you can frolic on the beach. I'm not made of steel." Tom's gaze followed her, and then he looked at me, his expression tight. "Mom's got a point, Ella. You can be a bit insensitive. Maybe now's not the time for a vacation." That hurt more than Nancy's words. My own husband, who should have had my back, sided with her over a simple, well-deserved break. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, a cocktail of emotions that left me more exhausted. So, my vacation days rolled around, and instead of lying on a beach somewhere, sipping something tropical, I was stuck at home. I spent those days mostly alone, with Tom at the laundry and Nancy giving me the cold shoulder. I'd escape to the city beach when I could, soaking up some sun and pretending things were different. Splitting my time between the clinic and the laundry wasn't my dream scenario, but after months of non-stop nagging from Nancy and Tom about not pitching in, I caved. "Fine, I'll help out at the laundry, but only part-time. I'm not giving up my job at the clinic," I told Tom, setting my terms. He seemed relieved, almost happy, but then he dropped another bomb. "That's great, babe, but I won't be able to pay you a salary. We'll just give you access to the family account, keep things simple and tax-free." I was too tired to argue. "Sure, whatever works," I muttered, not fully processing yet another sign that I was sinking deeper into their world, my own desires drifting away. The transition was rough. Mornings at the clinic were hectic, and afternoons at the laundry were a crash course in a business I had zero interest in. Still, I learned the ropes, got to know the regular customers, and even started seeing ways we could do things better. A few months in, I gathered enough courage to bring up my ideas at dinner. "Tom, Nancy, I've been thinking about how we could bring in more customers. Maybe we could offer loyalty discounts, or even host a weekly express service day?" Tom barely looked up from his plate. "Ella, I appreciate you trying to help, but I've been in this business since I was a kid. I know what works." I bit my lip, frustration bubbling. "It's just an idea. And there's also a room next door that just freed up. We could expand, offer more services." Nancy laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. "Trying to take over now? Think you can run things better than us? Don't make me laugh." I retreated, feeling smaller with each word. It was clear they didn't value my input, only my compliance. But I couldn't let it go. The laundry was struggling, and it pained me to watch something tied so closely to Tom fail because of stubbornness. One afternoon, as I folded clothes in the back, I overheard Tom arguing with a supplier on the phone. "No, I can't meet that order. We're not pulling enough profit this quarter," he said, frustration evident in his tone. I waited for him to hang up, then approached cautiously. "Tom, if we're struggling with profits, why not reconsider some of my suggestions? They could really help." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ella, I said no. This is how we've always done it. It's not about new ideas, it's about tradition, about keeping things the way my dad ran them." I stepped back, realizing this battle was lost before it even began. Day by day, I watched the laundry's profits dip, our arguments become more frequent, and the distance between us grow. It was my birthday, a day I hoped would be a small bright spot in the dreary grind of the past months. I left a note for Tom on the kitchen table early in the morning, telling him I'd be out until noon. I wanted some time for myself, to just breathe and maybe feel a bit special. I spent the morning downtown, picking out a beautiful new dress and then treating myself to a full makeover at the beauty salon, hair, nails, the works. It felt indulgent, spending money and time on myself like that, but it was my day, and I was determined to enjoy it. However, the moment I stepped back into the house, bags in hand and feeling lighter than I had in weeks, the atmosphere shifted. I was met with a storm. "Where the hell have you been?" Tom barked the second I closed the door. Next to him, Nancy stood with her arms crossed, her expression thunderous. "I left a note," I stammered, confused by their anger. "I was out for my birthday, remember?" "Birthday?" Tom scoffed, and Nancy snorted. "A lot of good that does us. You left the laundry unattended, and there was no breakfast prepared. You think today's somehow different?" Nancy accused, stepping closer. Her voice was sharp, each word a knife. Stunned, I felt my heart sink. "But it's just one morning. One morning out of the entire year," I said, my voice barely a whisper now, hurt flashing through me. Nancy's lips curled in disdain. "I don't care about your birthday. You're just lazy and stupid, thinking only about yourself. You don't even do a good job as a housekeeper." I looked to Tom, searching his face for any sign of support, any hint of the man I'd married. "Tom, you don't believe that, do you? Tell me you don't agree with her." He met my gaze, his eyes cold and distant. "She's right, Ella. Maybe you don't fit in here after all. I don't need this chaos." That was it. The last straw. My whole body trembled with the force of my decision. "I want a divorce, Tom." Nancy clapped her hands, her voice rising in excitement. "Finally, we'll be rid of you, you stupid, arrogant freeloader. And you'll pay us back for letting you live here for 3 years. We've wasted enough on you." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the tense air. "Oh, I'll pay you? Funny, I was thinking you owe me for all the unpaid labor. For every holiday, every sick day I never took. That's what you'll be paying me." Nancy's face fell, her mouth snapping shut. I didn't wait for another word. I marched upstairs, pulled out my suitcases, and started packing. Clothes, a few personal items, anything I could call mine. Within an hour, I was ready. Suitcase in hand, I walked out of that house. I didn't look back, not at the home I had tried to make mine, not at the life I thought I wanted. I moved into a small rented apartment, a place that was mine alone, no judgments, no snide remarks, just quiet and peace. For the first couple of days, I wallowed in my grief. But as I sat there in the silence of my new space, something shifted inside me. I was done crying. It was time to show them they were wrong, to prove that I could stand on my own. Fired up, I filed for divorce, laying out my case for the unpaid labor and the emotional turmoil they'd put me through. I also took a 3-month unpaid leave from the clinic. I needed this time, not just to heal but to set up my own venture, something that would hit Tom and Nancy where it hurt, their business. I remembered the vacant room next to their laundry, the same one I had suggested they expand into. It was a stroke of irony, or maybe fate, that it was still empty. With my savings, I signed the lease. The place was a mess, but I saw its potential. The renovations were tough, and every decision from paint colors to plumbing fixtures felt monumental. But I poured my heart into every detail. "This has to be perfect," I told the contractor, pointing out exactly where I wanted the new washers and dryers. Top of the line, everything. Once the place was shaped up, I moved on to the supplies and equipment, choosing only the best. Safety and quality were my top priorities. I installed video surveillance and high security locks, ensuring that my customers would never have to worry about their belongings. With the logistics in place, I focused on the customer experience. I set up a small coffee machine offering free coffee, created a cozy corner for kids, and even installed a couple of slot machines to keep clients entertained while they waited. Every detail was designed to make my laundry not just a necessity but a pleasant part of my customer's day. Opening day was a mix of nerves and excitement. People were curious, of course. Some came in just to see the new place, others out of loyalty to Tom and Nancy. But once they experienced the difference, word started to spread. I made it a point to meet every client, to ask about their day, to ensure they were satisfied with our service. "Thanks for choosing us," I'd say with a smile. "Let us know if there's anything else we can do for you." Slowly, word started spreading. Positive reviews popped up online, praising the clean facilities, friendly service, and innovative touches. More and more people began choosing my laundry over Tom's. One busy afternoon, as I refilled the coffee machine, a regular customer, Mrs. Henderson, approached me. "Ella, dear, I must say, your place is a breath of fresh air. I told all my friends about it." I smiled, handing her a cup. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means a lot to me. I'm glad you enjoy coming here." The popularity of my laundry grew, and with it, so did my confidence. I had created something out of nothing, turned pain into success. The satisfaction wasn't just in the profits or the praise, it was in proving that I could thrive, that I could make something better, all on my own. It was a busy Tuesday afternoon when they walked in, Nancy and Tom, looking like a storm brewing on the horizon. I was behind the counter, sorting through orders, but I straightened up the moment I saw them. My heart skipped, not out of fear, but readiness. I had prepared for this moment, although I hoped it would never come. Nancy wasted no time, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "You've ruined us, Ella. Stolen our customers with your underhanded tactics." Tom stood behind her, his expression hard to read. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I haven't stolen anything. People choose where they want to go. I just provided a better option," I responded, my hand subtly pressing the button under the counter that alerted my security team. "This is all low, even for you," Nancy continued, her finger jabbing in the air towards me. "Making us bankrupt, you think you're clever?" I sighed, shaking my head. "I think I'm fair. I offered ideas, remember? You both pushed me out, laughed at my suggestions. I built this from scratch, honestly, and with hard work." Tom finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Ella, this isn't what we..." "Tom, look around you. I've made this place what it is, because I listened, I adapted, and I cared. Not only about profits, but about people." Nancy's face was red, her anger palpable. "You think you're better than us, that you can just replace us?" "No, Nancy. I just chose not to settle for mediocrity," I replied, pulling up reviews on my phone and pushing it across the counter towards them. "Read these. Customers didn't leave because of me. They left because of dirty rooms, rude service, and poor quality. They left because you refused to change." She glanced at the screen, then looked away, her mouth tightening. "And now," she hissed, turning her wrath back to Tom, "you've let her destroy everything your father built." Tom's face crumpled, and for a moment, I felt a pang of old affection, quickly smothered by years of strain. Nancy turned back to me, desperation in her voice. "Give him a job, then. Take him on here. We're drowning in debt. We're going to close down." I looked at Tom, seeing the man I once loved, the man who sided with his mother against me when I needed him most. "I'm sorry, Tom. I'm running a business, not a charity. Please leave my property, or I will have to call the police." They left, Nancy muttering under her breath, Tom silent. Watching them go, I felt a chapter close, one filled with hard lessons and tougher resolutions. Since then, my laundry continued to thrive. Word of mouth and positive online reviews kept new customers coming. I eventually decided to leave the clinic altogether, pouring my heart into this venture that had started as a challenge and turned into my passion. So, there I was, elbow deep in a bin of discounted scarves at Maribel's, my workplace, and practically my second home, when I first heard his voice. "Hey, is this the line for the register, or are you just guarding the best deals for yourself?" I popped my head up, a bit annoyed at first. After all, snagging the best bargains required focus. But then I saw him, James, with a crooked smile and a camera slung around his neck. "No line here," I said, standing up and straightening my blouse, a vintage find I was particularly proud of. "Just making sure none of these treasures slip away." He laughed, a nice, easy sound. "Mind if I dive in?" "I'm looking for something to jazz up a shoot. I'm a photographer." I could tell by the camera, I said, and we both laughed. It was a straightforward conversation, nothing fancy, but it clicked right away. James had an eye for style, which I guessed came with his job. As we talked, he mentioned he was at Mirabelle's to pick out accessories for a fashion show shoot. I told him about my knack for putting together killer outfits from sale items and leftovers. We chatted more about fashion, photography, and our favorite spots in the city to find hidden gems. Before we knew it, an hour had passed and we were still rifling through the bins together. "You know, you should come to the fashion show this weekend," James suggested. "See what I do with these scarves you helped me pick." I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't used to getting invites to shows, usually just cleaning up after them at the store. But something about James's straightforward manner made me want to say yes. "All right, I'll come. It'll be nice to see the scarves in action instead of folded up in a bin." "Great," he said, his eyes lighting up. "It's a date then." "Well, not a date, unless you want it to be." We exchanged numbers and went our separate ways, but not before he bought a ridiculously flamboyant scarf that I had jokingly suggested. The rest of my day at Mirabelle's flew by. I couldn't stop thinking about how natural it felt to talk to James. It wasn't just his looks, though. Okay, he was pretty cute. It was the way he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. And in a world where fashion could be all about the price tag, his appreciation for my budget-savvy skills felt refreshing. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. I found myself looking forward to seeing James again and curious about the fashion show. True to his word, James met me outside the venue, his camera in hand, ready to capture the event. The show was fantastic, the models looked stunning, and the scarves we'd picked out added just the right pop of color. Afterward, James and I headed to a cozy cafe nearby to talk more over coffee. Sitting across from him, I felt a connection that was hard to ignore. We talked about everything, from our favorite bands to our shared passion for thrift shopping. James laughed at my tales of epic sale conquests. "You really have an eye for this," he said, stirring his coffee. "Ever thought of doing it professionally?" "Every day of my life," I admitted. "But it's tough to break into styling full-time without the right connections." Things moved quickly after that. Before I knew it, James was introducing me to his family. His parents were warm and welcoming, which eased my nerves a bit. His mom, Linda, hugged me right away, and his dad, Mark, was all smiles as we sat down for dinner at their place. "You have a lovely home," I complimented, genuinely impressed by the cozy decor. "Thank you, dear," Linda replied. We tried to make it welcoming. Dinner was going smoothly until Claire, James's younger sister, walked in. She was the complete opposite of the warm reception I'd received so far. Dressed to the nines, she eyed my outfit, a chic ensemble I'd snagged at a fraction of the cost, and smirked. "So, you're the girl James can't stop talking about," Claire said, her voice dripping with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "I guess I am," I responded, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Our conversation was interrupted by Mark's compliment about my outfit. "You look wonderful tonight, Elise. James tells us you're quite the bargain hunter." Proudly, I said. "Thank you. Yes, I love finding good deals. Makes fashion more fun when it's like a treasure hunt." Linda nodded in approval, but Claire just rolled her eyes. I couldn't stand wearing something so economical. I prefer the finer things in life, not leftovers from a clearance bin. Mark frowned slightly at his daughter's rudeness. "Claire, you could learn a thing or two about saving from Elise here." "Oh, please," Claire scoffed. "I'm not about to pinch pennies and miss out on the best. Life's too short for second-hand silk." The table went quiet. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. James, meanwhile, just gave Claire a weak smile and didn't say a word. It stung that he didn't stand up for me. After dinner, as we were leaving, I couldn't hold back any longer. James, why didn't you say anything? Your sister was outright rude. He sighed, a look of discomfort crossing his face. Look, Elise, I know Claire can be a bit much, but she's my sister. I have to stick by her, you know? But sticking by doesn't mean you let her walk all over me, or anyone, for that matter, I countered, frustrated. James ran his hands through his hair. It's complicated. We've always been close, and I don't want to stir up drama. Let's just ignore her comments, okay? I nodded, not quite satisfied, but willing to let it go for the moment. However, deep down, I knew this was something we'd have to address sooner or later. If things were going to move forward with James, he needed to know that I wasn't just going to roll over and take that kind of treatment, not from Claire or anyone else. Things with Claire went from bad to worse after that dinner. It was like she had it out for me, finding every opportunity to dig into my lifestyle and choices. One sunny afternoon really highlighted the tension between us. I was on my way to check out a sale at a high-end boutique when I heard someone call out in a loud, mocking tone. There she goes, bargain bin queen herself. I turned to see Claire, flanked by her usual entourage, sneering at me from across the street. Her friends joined in with laughter, obviously enjoying the show. Yeah, headed to snatch up another glamorous discount? Claire added, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Keeping my composure, I responded with a calm and clear voice. Actually, yes. They've got a sale on their luxury line, half off today. You guys should check it out, it's a steal. To my surprise, Claire's friends paused, exchanging looks. One of them, a tall girl with sharp features, seemed genuinely interested. Really? Half off? That sounds like a great deal actually. Yeah, let's go see, another chimed in, and just like that, the group crossed the street towards me, leaving a fuming Claire behind. She huffed and stomped her foot, clearly not used to being ignored. But the confrontations weren't limited to the streets, they followed me to work. One particularly busy day at Maribel's, Claire strutted in, her demeanor as haughty as ever. She browsed through the racks of new arrivals, then came straight to the register where I was helping another customer. Hey, I need a favor, she said loudly, cutting off the person I was assisting. Can you give me a discount on this? She asked, holding up a sleek, expensive-looking dress from our latest collection. I'm sorry, Claire, but that's a new arrival. We don't have discounts on the latest collection, I explained, trying to keep my professional tone. Come on, Elise. We're practically family. You can make an exception, she insisted, her voice edged with entitlement. That's not how it works, Claire. I can't give discounts at my discretion, especially not on new stock. Her face turned a shade of red, and her voice rose. That's ridiculous. You're just being difficult because you don't like me. I'm going to talk to James about this. Feel free to do so, but our store policy won't change, I replied firmly, handing her back the dress. She threw the dress onto the counter and stormed out, muttering about how unhelpful I was and how she'd make sure her brother knew about my poor attitude. True to her word, James called me that evening, his tone frustrated. Elise, my sister came home really upset today. Why wouldn't you help her out? She just wanted a little discount. James, you know I work in retail. I can't just hand out discounts. It's against store policy, and it could get me in trouble, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing annoyance. But she's my sister. Can't you just make an exception this once? He pressed. No, James, I really can't. It's my job on the line. You wouldn't want me to compromise my work, would you? I countered. We ended the conversation there, but the issue remained unresolved. The constant tug-of-war over Claire's expectations and my refusal to bend the rules was straining not just my relationship with her, but with James as well. After the discount debacle, I did my best to keep my distance from Claire, but family dinners made that nearly impossible. At each gathering, she seemed more intent on flaunting her latest conquest, a wealthy guy she'd started seeing. She'd throw around comments about the lavish lifestyle she was expecting, each one feeling like a tiny jab at my more modest ways. During one such dinner, she was bubbling over with details about her upcoming wedding plans. "Oh, you wouldn't believe the size of the diamond he's getting me. It's simply massive," she boasted, making sure everyone at the table could hear. James, sitting next to me, chimed in with genuine enthusiasm. "Yeah, sis, make sure you snag that guy before he realizes you're way out of his league." He laughed, nudging her playfully. The conversation drifted to other topics, but the undercurrent of Claire's bragging lingered. It was clear she loved the spotlight. Meanwhile, James turned to me with a softer expression once we were alone in the car. "You're quiet tonight. Everything okay?" he asked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm fine, just thinking about our own plans," I said, forcing a smile. His eyes lit up. "Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask you." He trailed off, and I felt my heart skip a beat as he pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. "Elise, will you marry me?" he said, opening the box to reveal a beautiful, simple ring that was perfectly my style. Tears sprang to my eyes, not just from the joy of the moment, but also from relief. "Yes, James, of course, I will." We spent the next few months deep in wedding planning. I threw myself into every detail, designing the style of the celebration with a keen eye. I ordered a special wedding dress with a large bow, something unique and stunning. I sketched and planned each aspect of the decor, from the photography areas to the table settings, ensuring everything followed a cohesive, elegant theme. At home, I spread out my designs on the living room floor, poring over fabric swatches and invitation samples. James watched, impressed with my dedication. "This is going to be incredible, Elise. You have such a great eye," he said, leaning over to examine a sketch of the archway I designed. "I just want it to be perfect. I want our guests to feel as special as we will on that day," I replied, my eyes scanning the room, imagining how it would all come together. We kept all the plans and sketches in a folder at home, a folder that became more stuffed with ideas and confirmations as the days went by. Every now and then, James would flip through it, nodding approvingly at my latest additions or suggesting little tweaks. Things started to feel rushed when Claire announced her wedding date, which was suspiciously set for 2 months before mine. I couldn't help but think she was trying to upstage me. Meeting her fiancé, a polite guy from a wealthy background, I figured he didn't really know what he was getting into. He seemed nice enough, but oblivious to Claire's competitive streak. One afternoon, I was out shopping with Linda, my future mother-in-law, trying to pick out some last-minute decorations for Claire's wedding, as well as some items for my own. We decided to take a break and grabbed some coffee at a nearby cafe. Linda stirred her coffee, looking a bit distressed. "I just don't understand Claire sometimes. She's leaving everything to the last minute. It's like she doesn't care about the details at all." I nodded, sipping my own coffee. "Yeah, it's a lot to pull together a wedding." Linda gave me an awkward smile. "I hate to impose, especially with your own wedding coming up. But maybe you could give her some advice? She seems to respect your style, even if she doesn't show it." "I can try," I said, though the thought of working closely with Claire on anything filled me with dread. The opportunity came up at a family dinner later that week. The atmosphere was tense, as usual, thanks to the underlying rivalry that Claire seemed keen on fostering. During dessert, Linda brought up the topic. "Elise has been doing such a wonderful job planning her wedding," Linda began, casting a meaningful glance my way. "Maybe she could give you some tips, Claire?" Claire, who had been halfway through bragging about her honeymoon plans, paused and looked at me. Her expression was hard to read. "Thanks, but no thanks, Mom. I've got it covered." Relief washed over me, and I quickly chimed in. "Of course, whatever works best for you." "Yeah, I want my wedding to be unique, you know? Not like anyone else's," Claire added, a bit pointedly. The conversation moved on, but the jab lingered in the air. I just shrugged. If Claire wanted to take on everything herself, that was fine by me. less drama to deal with. As the days ticked down to Claire's wedding, I threw myself into finalizing my own plans. My days were filled with calls to vendors, fittings for my dress with the large bow that I adored, and meetings with the decorator to ensure every detail was perfect. The moment I arrived at Claire's wedding venue, my heart sank. It was like walking into a mirror image of the wedding I had been planning for months. The floral arrangements, the decor, even the small touches I'd prided myself on choosing were all there, as if lifted straight from my sketches. "Can you believe this? It's all so gorgeous," Linda exclaimed, completely unaware of the origin of the designs. I barely managed a nod, my eyes scanning the setup. It was more than just resemblance, it was a carbon copy. My mind raced, trying to understand how this could have happened. Then, Claire and her fiancé made their entrance, and my breath caught in my throat. She was wearing the exact dress I had custom ordered, down to the last detail, and clutching the bouquet I had so carefully designed. The sight was a gut punch. I pulled my phone out and dialed James, my hands shaking. "James, where are you? We need to talk. Now." He picked up, his voice strained. "Hey, I'm at the back with the guys. What's up? How could Claire's wedding look exactly like what we planned? The decorations, her dress, even the flowers, how, James?" There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. "Elise, it's all a misunderstanding. You're overthinking it." Overthinking it? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Ending the call, I marched over to where Linda was standing with Claire and her groom, just as another relative was gushing about the decor. "It's just stunning, Claire. The creativity here is amazing. How did you come up with all this?" they asked, their voice filled with admiration. Claire glanced at me, her smile faltering for a moment before she regained her composure. "Oh, I've been planning this for months. Wanted to keep it a surprise." I couldn't hold back. "Really, Claire? When did you start planning?" "Because it looks exactly like the plans I have at home. The ones I showed to James." The area went quiet. Heads turned. Claire's face turned a shade of red, but it was James's reaction that caught my attention. He hurried over, his expression pleading. "Elise, let's not do this here. It's her big day," he whispered, trying to lead me away by the elbow. Ignoring his attempts, I pressed on. "No, James. I want to know why our wedding, has been replicated here today." Linda, looking between us, finally spoke up. "What's going on? Elise, are you saying these are your ideas?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Every single one of them. And the dress. That's my dress, the one I chose for our wedding." The crowd murmured, and Claire's husband looked between us, confusion written all over his face. James finally spoke, his voice calm but cold. "Elise, the wedding is months away. I thought it wouldn't matter." Claire liked the ideas, and it saved money. The guests watched, some with open curiosity, others with discomfort. Linda looked devastated, her hands covering her mouth. I stood there, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. Not just Claire's, but James's, the man I was supposed to marry, who had so casually handed over my dreams to appease his sister. "James, how could you think it's okay to give my wedding dress to your sister?" I demanded, my voice sharp enough that it drew more eyes toward us. "It's just a dress, Elise," he replied, his tone dismissive, which only fueled my anger. "You can wear it again, and no one will remember by the time we have our wedding. It's not a disposable item." My shock at his response was palpable. "Not disposable? That's not the point, James. It's about respect, about the promises we made to each other. How could you disrespect me like this, for her?" I gestured toward Claire, who stood a few feet away, a smug smile playing on her lips. Seeing my distress, she couldn't resist gloating. "I just wanted to look beautiful today, and I did. Thanks for the dress, by the way. It's nice to know I'll wear it before you do, makes it extra special, doesn't it?" Her words were like a slap in the face. The crowd murmured, some in shock, others unsure of where to look. "I'm not doing this, James. I can't marry someone who thinks so little of me, someone who sacrifices my happiness for his sister's whims," I said loudly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Before he could respond, his parents stepped forward. Linda looked heartbroken. Mark's face was set in a hard line of disapproval. "James, what you did was wrong. You should have stood by Elise, not undermine her," Linda said, her voice tinged with sadness. Mark chimed in, his tone harsh. "And Claire, we are ashamed of your actions. Stealing someone else's ideas, gloating about it. That's not how we raised you." Finally, the groom's parents, who had been quietly observing, spoke up, their words grave and full of disappointment. "You can't start a family life based on lies," Claire's future father-in-law stated sternly. Hearing this, Claire lost any semblance of control. "I don't care about any of you. I'll do what I want," she screamed at her in-laws, her voice shrill and filled with defiance. It was the last straw for her groom. He stepped up to the microphone, his voice loud and clear. "I can't do this. I can't marry into deceit." He looked directly at Claire, his decision firm. "I'm sorry, but there will be no wedding today." The reaction was immediate. Claire's face crumpled, and she started yelling at him, at her parents, at anyone who would listen. James, ever the peacemaker, tried to soothe her, but the damage was done. His parents looked on, dismayed and disappointed. "This is all your fault, Elise." James spat out, his words laced with blame. "You ruined my sister's wedding day." "No, James," I said, my voice calm but cold. "Claire ruined her own wedding day. And you chose not to see what was happening because you didn't want to upset her." I walked out, not looking back, the sound of arguing fading behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool air felt like a balm. I was free from the twisted loyalties and deception that had marred what should have been a joyful occasion. Breaking up with James was like ripping off a band-aid. It hurt like hell at first, but it was necessary for healing. After the disastrous end to Claire's non-wedding, I realized I couldn't just let it all slide. There were too many expenses piled up, too many plans trashed, because of what James did. So, I got myself a lawyer. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was tense. The judge called the session to order, and my lawyer laid out the case, presenting receipts, contracts, and testimony from various vendors. But the turning point came when Linda, surprisingly, agreed to testify. Her presence gave me a jolt of confidence. "Linda, can you tell the court about the events leading up to the wedding that didn't happen?" my lawyer asked. "Yes," Linda started, her voice steady, but filled with regret. "My son gave his sister the wedding dress and decorations that were meant for Elise's wedding. It was done without Elise's consent. I was very disappointed." "And in your opinion, did this action directly affect Elise's decision to cancel the wedding?" the lawyer continued. "It did. It was the last straw for her, and honestly, I can't blame her," Linda replied, casting a sad glance my way. The judge nodded, jotting down notes. James's lawyer tried to paint it as a minor misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. After a long deliberation, the judge ruled in my favor. The court finds for the plaintiff. It is clear that the actions of the defendant led directly to the financial losses and emotional distress suffered by Ms. Elise. With the compensation I received, I did something I should have done years ago. I enrolled in a stylist course specializing in wedding fashion. The money helped me quit my job at Maribel's, giving me the freedom to focus entirely on building my dream career. Months later, my phone buzzed with appointment requests and messages from clients. My services were in demand, my ideas fresh and respected. One afternoon, while arranging some portfolios, my phone rang. It was Linda. "Elise, I just wanted to say. I just wish things could have been different, you know, with James and everything." "Me too," I said, though part of me wasn't sure. If not for that disaster, I might never have found my true path. Hanging up, I looked around my new studio filled with fabric swatches and glowing testimonials from happy clients. I was exactly where I needed to be, doing what I loved. Sure, the road here was bumpy, but sometimes life's detours lead to the best destinations.